Sword of Coming Chapter 884. Qin Pingon and Xiao Imo stood at the railing of the ferry. Under their eyelids the earth, mountains and rivers were winding like silk threads. Raise your sight. If the sky has no four walls, then the vision of man is like an invisible wall in which everyone is imprisoned. Xiao Imo asked, "The sun is waiting for someone?" "I am waiting for the owner of this ferry." Qin Pingon turned his head and looked at the third floor of the ferry, then withdrew his gaze and took Xiao Imo to continue walking along the bow. In fact, the fairy named Lichuan at their feet was still a magic weapon of the immortal family. Since the establishment of the Song family of Dali, more than 100 years ago, the Song family of Dali had not yet escaped the status of a vassal of the Liu dynasty, internal and external troubles and weak national power. They often needed to borrow this mountain ferry from the Changchun Palace to solve the local state. In the county's drought, immortal masters were invited to cast spells and rained sweet rain. It is said that the Dai court owed a lot of debts for this, and Changchun Palace never collected debts with the Song family. So when the Dai dynasty rose, several Song emperors, the monks of Changchun Palace, have always been treated with special preference. If it weren't for the fact that Changchun Palace had no monks at the Yupu realm, it would be undoubtedly a matter of joining the sect. Presumably, the Emperor of Dali would make an exception and personally participate in the celebration to congratulate him. Qin Pingon explained, "We boarded the ship before and were uninvited. If we leave without saying goodbye, we will be rude. It is a taboo thing to do on the mountain. If we take the initiative to visit the ferry steward, it will be easier to think about it when we return to the Changchun Palace. In Beiju Luzhou it doesn't matter. The customs of the two places are still different. It can be regarded as one side of the water and soil nurturing the other side." Xiao Imo smiled and said, "Stay by the sun's side with ears and eyes. You can learn a lot of human feelings outside of books." Qin Pingon didn't take this at all, but just by the way told Xiao Imo about the past of Changchun Palace and the Song family of Dali. Xiao Imo took a high look at this Dali local fairy mansion and said, "Through the difficulties together, Changchun Palace can be regarded as waiting for the clouds to see the moon." Qin Pingon nodded and said, "To help each other in the same boat is indeed a good fate. Xiao Imo, in the future you will leave Luopa Mountain, Juzhou and other places are easy to say, but Beiju Luzhou must be visited." Okay, Xiao Imo must travel north to this place if he has the opportunity. Qin Pingon took Xiao Imo from the bow to the stern and looked north. If there are sword immortals in Luzhou, Beiju who died in a foreign land, a continent of mountains and rivers, as long as you are a sword repairer, no matter you are foe, there is a custom of sacrificing swords on a continent. Just like the ghost mythical valley in the Skeleton Beach, Jingwenqing Gaoqing will take the initiative to hand his fists, not hesitating to expend a lot of spiritual energy, but also to open up the restrictions of heaven and earth, just to let the sword repair the Pushi commemorate the sword and lift up higher. As if sacrificing the sword, the ghost valley can't fall behind people, and the sword light can't be lower than people. And the Muyi Mountain, which is close at hand, and Pima Zong, who are mortal enemies with Jingguan City, will never wait for an opportunity to attack Jingguan City in any way. Just about this matter, Qin Pingon didn't say much to Xiao Imo. Although the scene was magnificent and breathtaking. But it's best to never see it again. In the two foreign battlefields of the Great Wall of Jianqi and Beipingzu, the sword fairy of Luzhou and Beiju, who could have been out of the way, has withered too much. On the third floor of the ferry, a beautiful woman with a successful cultivation and youthful appearance, Xiu, dressed as a woman without powder and graceful, just accidentally glanced at Qin Pingon. She forced herself to calm down and sighed in her heart. With a sound, it is a blessing, not a curse, but a misfortune, so she can only show up in person. The woman is the current steward of this Lichuan ferry. If possible, she would like to pretend that she hasn't seen anything, and the other party quietly boarded the ship and ignored it. Swaying off the boat, let alone stopping, blamed myself for still not holding back the inquisitive heart, and looked at the bow of the ship a few more times. She was really curious about the legendary sword fairy in Qingshan. She took a deep breath, stroked the blue silk on the temples and adjusted the lap of the Lifa robe. Earlier, Yu Honggao disciples had a dispute with others. In a battle, the mountain fairy used to deal with these kinds of rivers and lakes. It was always loose outside and tight inside. Then on the Lichuan ferry side, someone found that among the crowd watching, there seemed to be two unregistered gas trainers, all of whom were strange faces. Looking at it again, they were almost scared out of their bodies. One of them was actually the sovereign Qin of Luopa Mountain who stabbed the sky in Jingyang Mountain is called rituals. He demolished the Patriarch Hall and erected a monument on the border. The female cultivator who was specially responsible for checking the abnormal fairy quickly found the steward and asked the latter to decide. Rush people? Make up money? Of course, it's up to the manager to decide whether to invite Sword Immortal to drink or drink tea. The female clerk calmed down for a while, and then she pinched the tactics and performed a transposition technique. When she came to the deck of the ferry, she hurriedly walked towards the sword fairy in Xianxia who had only one entourage at the stern. It is not an exaggeration to say that it is bold and brazen. Compared with the general mountain school, the news of Changchun Palace can be said to be one of the most informed mountains in Aquarius. She is a Jindan Dixian of Changchun Palace, serving as an enshrined elder. She has a seat in the Patriarch Hall, and the seat is relatively forward. Therefore, compared with the genealogical monks of Xingyang Mountain, Lialongqing and Yunxia Mountain, she needs to know more inside stories on the mountain and heard more horrifying truths. Seeing the young mountain lord of the Luopa Mountain, she bowed her knees and gave a blessing and demeanor. I saw the Lord Qinshan, my name is Gan Yi with the name of rhyme, and now she is the steward of this ferry. The female seminarian was afraid of taking advantage of her name, so she hurriedly added, "It's the sweet, refreshing joy." Qin Pingon clasped his fist and said, "I have seen Gon manage things." Xiao Imo glanced at Gan Yi, full of spirit with 2 eyes. This golden core female cultivator has bright eyes and a pair of wines on her cheeks. So the woman in front of her is a kind person. Qin Pingon helped introduce. My house is dedicated to Xiao Imo small and small. Strange Imo. Xiao Imo made a polite, smiled kindly and whispered softly, "Fortunately to see Master Gon." Gan Yi hurriedly returned the gift. Gan Yi has seen Master Xiao Imo. God knows if the other party is another hidden sword fairy? The Changchun Palace has a lesson learned in this matter, so Gan Yi can't help but be careful. Gan Yi asked tentatively, "Lord Qinshan is going back to Luopa Mountain on the way?" Qin Pingon shook his head and said, "There are 2 friends from the rivers and lakes on the boat who have known each other for many years. They came here to take a look. They had a drink and were just about to go back to the capital. I had to apologize to Gan Guan for rash boarding with Xiao Imo earlier. I wanted to say that the cost of docking at Nujiadu for Lichuan Ferry could be waived." This sentence almost blurted out, but fortunately he held it back. Talking about this with the wealthy Changchun Palace is too swollen and fat. Gan Yi's mind turned sharply and asked cautiously, "Qin Shan's his friend but the great master fish?" In fact, she didn't want to ask and it was easy to get involved, so she really didn't dare not ask. There is no way, chatting with these high-powered mountain monks, the other party often has something to say something else. It seems to be all nonsense, but in fact not a word is nonsense. She didn't dare to regard this young sword fairy from a poor background as a monk in the mountains who was pure-hearted and only relied on luck. It is Yu Hong. The ferry fee for that group of people has been collected. Pay it back. That's too cheap. But there are other ways to make up. For example, she personally sent a few jars of Changchun Palace Immortal Brew over. Otherwise, just a great master of martial arts, Changchun Palace really wouldn't have to struggle to cling to it. Just a rather young but hopeless 9-level martial artist, it is not an end. Although Changchun Palace is not a sect, it is the native immortal home of the Dai dynasty second only to the Longquan Jianzong. What's more, the mountain is also close to the place of Longxing of the Song family of Dai. Of course, now there is another Luopa mountain with the prefix Song. Qin Pingon shook his head and said, "It's not Yu Hong, it's the old gang leader Zhu and Mr. Yu. But it's also a coincidence that both seniors are now serving as elders in Fushatang." How Gan Yi was, and immediately understood that she had to send out 3 jars of fermented rice at least. Of course, Yu Hong is indispensable, otherwise it will make it difficult for the 2 seniors of the river and lakes of Qin Shanju to be human. Qin Pingon was about to leave. Gan Yi suddenly said, "Lord Qin Shan, it is our hindsight from the Changchun Palace. Changchun Palace is grateful for the fact that me Dajiangxian guarded the road back then. The scenery along the way, if there is no Zhou, I hope Michigan Dajiangxian will forgive me a lot." A few years ago, Changchun Palace had a female cultivator from the line of Lin Yu, the elder of the supreme being. The journey to the south was nothing unexpected and everything went smoothly. I never thought of the only great accident but the one who walked right in front of my eyes. They passed by Piyun Mountain on the way, and there happened to be a famous guest named Yumi on the side of the Beiwei Mountain monarch's mansion. If they wanted to go south to return to their hometown, they went all the way to protect the road. At that time, Pianshan said that the ancestor of Yumi's family is an old acquaintance with Wei Shanjun, and he is not a jiazi time in his cultivation. He is a master of sevuing, and he is a master of sword and talisman. Not bad. It turned out to be all nonsense. Qin Pingon nodded and smiled. Okay, small things, I can help you talk. But I have also heard you say about it. I can hear that he has a good impression of Changchun Palace, saying that your elders on the mountain are well guarded. Do your best, the younger generations practice diligently, get along very easily. There was a smile on Gan Yi's face as if she had taken a reassurance pill. A sword immortal from the Great Wall of Jianqi has an unpredictable temperament. It is really impossible for people to take it lightly. In the Patriarch Hall of the Changchun Palace, this matter has been mentioned many times and it is still pending. The kind words of Qin Shanzhu in front of him should not be taken too seriously. But if the other party doesn't even bother to say a word of kindness, it will be extremely problematic. I never thought that today's casual chat, which does not seek merit but seeks no demerits, and the unexpected joy, let Gan Yi help her teacher solve a small heart disease. On the journey to the south in the territory of Huangting State, Changchun Palace dismissed a haunting painting demon from Yunshan Temple, and then relieved an old soldier from the trap, went to the middle of Aquarius Island and led a great heroic hero to his hometown. Finally, the most important secret was to go to Xianxia Temple to buy a small piece of pine for the General Su Gaoshan who was still alive at the time. The supreme elder of the Changchun Palace and the ancestor of the Qin family in Daegu had a very story between the two parties. Therefore, the Changchun Palace thought that this was possible beforehand. As a result, when the other party heard that he wanted to buy Wanyin pine, he turned his face. I recognized the person and said it was impossible. Because the Wanyin pine tree named Long Love grew on the Xianxian terrace of Xianxia Temple, and it belonged to the great sword immortal Wei Jin in name. Therefore, a group of Changchun Palace female cultivators touched their noses at Xianxia Temple. They returned disappointed and were anxious. They didn't know how they confessed to the master and how the master should be the best with a great military minister. The patrol envoy confessed. Unexpectedly, Lu Yinhua was bright in another village. At the Nujiashan ferry on the way home, Yumi gave Han Bia a piece of pine in private when he disembarked. In fact, after the Changchun Palace determined the authenticity of Wanyin song, it was extremely puzzled how a monk of the middle five realms who had passed Yunshan Kiching succeeded in obtaining this thing. Even if the monarch Weibo opened the golden mouth with Xianxia Temple's temper, he would not nod his head. Steel, who has the ability to cross the mountain and water restrictions of the Xianxia Temple, and has the courage to climb the Long Love Old Pine. Later in the Old Dragon City the fighting was fierce. During the period an unknown sword fairy with outstanding combat power appeared. He was handsome and his sword light was like a rainbow. He liked to cut the demon tribe's earth fairy either by dividing the body or cutting it off. And it seems that this person is old acquaintance with the female sword fairy Li Kai of Luzhou in Beiju. Changchun Palace first checked the identity of this person by comparing his own intelligence with Dallas spy information, only to discover that it turned out to be the Yumi of the sea-viewing realm. When the dispute between Luopa Mountain and Jingyang Mountain began as expected, it was Miyu, the Yupu realm sword fairy who likes to drunk and lie on Yunxia at the Great Wall of Jianqi. The elder brother Mi, who is a great sword fairy who was once expected to enter the ascending realm. There is a saying by the Dali frontier army that the more dead people they have seen, the look in the eyes of the living on the battlefield is almost the same as seeing the dead. When killing people, the hands are more stable and the heart is more stable. This is the case in the battlefield at the foot of the mountain. Presumably the Great Wall of Jianqi is even more the same or even worse. Therefore, the Changchun Palace elder who was in charge of protecting the road, because he often said coldly to the Yumi during his travels, now he often feels that his neck is chilled, as if she was wandering around the gate of a ghost. Qin Pingon was a little puzzled. With Changchun Palace's detached position on Dei Mountain, he had never had any grudges with Luopa Mountain. Seeing herself as the owner of the mountain, Gan Yi said that she would not be so restrained. It's pretty good. Because today's Qin Pingon doesn't know anything yet. In addition to martial arts, monks on the mountain, there are also various, small hills, that do not have the boundary of the hill. For example, between the fairy stewards who often meet outside, there will be private friendships of different depths, and even special mirror flowers, water and moon to connect with each other, to facilitate the interoperability of some ways of making money. And he, the last hidden official of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, was attributed to the Chunban's high battle that fell down the mountain that year, and his prestige in the loose gang of the transcontinental ferry was unimaginable. It's a godlike god. With the lifting of the ban on Shanshui Dibao by the Confucian Temple, there are no more taboos, and it is even more thrilling. So much so that among the ferry stewards in the world, a competition from low to high gradually appeared inexplicably. Holding a transcontinental ferry in hand, I look down on the ferry that can only fly around within one continent. Fortunately, I have been to the upside-down mountain and doing a little bit of power for the Jianqi Great Wall. I look down on those who don't. The transcontinental ferry that had traded with the Great Wall of Jianqi went to the upside-down mountain and walked through the gate of Chunban's High to talk about business, and looked down upon the poor worms who had never seated in the lobby of Chunban's High. Those who have been to Chunban's High and participated in that mountain discussion should look down on those who have not experienced the hidden official style in person. Nowadays, such a small group of ferry boats are in charge and they are all over the top. Looking at all the other ferry boats, they are all rubbish. After all, how do you know that the undercurrents of the discussion back then were extremely dangerous? Our lives were hanging by a thread, and the wave of Chunbazai's unresolved wave rose again. The two sides confronted each other. The hermit led more than a dozen sword immortals and he almost closed the door and hacked people. Gan Yi, as the steward of the Lichuan ferry, has of course heard some secret rumors about clouds covering the mist. So Gan Yi knows who she faces. It was not Qin Shanzhu, nor was it a close disciple of Wensheng's line, but the last hermit of the Great Wall of Jianqi. Last time the Changchun Palace Patriarch Hall was discussing matters, the palace lord said something meaningful. Our day is not far away from Beiju Luzhou. Gan Yi said sincerely, if Qin Shanzhu is not in a hurry, you can taste our Changchun Palace wine. Qin Pingan declined to say, forget it this time, I won't make any more harassment with Xiao Mo. The Changchun Palace was listed as one of the candidates of the sect by the Dali court, and there was no way to fight for it. Song Changjing also asked the Confucian Temple for 3 additional places in the Confucian Temple before discussing matters. Changchun Palace did not run around like Xingyang Mountain and Yunxia Mountain to find a way. He did not think about getting a place for himself, probably because he was afraid of it. The Li Song family was embarrassed because of this. It can be seen that Changchun Palace's sense of proportion is not generally good. Although Qin Pingan already knew about the 3 places, the Dai dynasty had arranged for them, namely the next sect of Xingyang Mountain named Huangshan Jianzong by Emperor Bamboo, and a large temple near Longqiu of Yendang Mountain, plus Chao Rong's Taoism. Therefore, the Changchun Palace will not be an exception to the sect, but the status of the candidate of the sect is not an empty title to add to the cake. Once the Dali Iron Cavalry makes a great battle in the wild world, even if there is no Jade Pure Land in the Changchun Palace, it can still be used. With permission from the Confucian Temple, he was able to make up for the vacancy. The next sect of the gods as well as Yunxia Mountain had to wait behind to make it. Seeing Qin Pingan's unwillingness to stop drinking, Gan Yi was obviously a little disappointed. She also didn't dare to joke with Qin Pingan casually. Otherwise, Gan Yi really has a sincere statement that is not a joke and she wants to talk to the hermit. As long as Qin Shanzhu is willing to go to the Changchun Palace as a guest, even if it is just a few glasses of wine and leave, the gang of crazy girls who are responsible for serving the wine to the table can grab their heads and care about their fellowship. It is important to know that the court ladies of Changchun have always been extremely enlightened in their treatment of love between men and women. A young female cultivator has already threatened that if Qin Jianxian came in person I would be able to show up with a drink, and if I had to come here inadvertently I would lick my feet and I didn't expect to pour it into my arms. There is no escape. Where does Qin Pingan know the secrets of these smoky mountains? But if he really knew about it, it is estimated that Changchun Palace would not even think about seeing Qin Shan's face for at least a few hundred years. Qin Pingan said goodbye. Wearing a blue shirt, his body turned into dozens of faint sword lights, which flashed by on the ferry. Xiao Imo smiled, bowed his head and clasped his fists, said goodbye to Gan Yi and then disappeared out of thin air. There is no spiritual ripple on the Lichuan ferry. the fairy formation is like a fake, but Gan Yi is not surprised. At dusk the clouds burned like fire. Because Qin Pingan didn't rush back to Dei capital, the sword light condensed his figure in the distance, and then the sword light dissipated again, reuniting further north 100 miles away. No longer using this unskilled escape method, Qin Pingan took a walk on a sea of fiery clouds, and smiled with the little mo around him. Hometown proverb: the fire burns the big cloud at night and you will travel thousands of miles tomorrow. Actually, he landed in the sky of Lizhu Cave. Before taking root, very few people really traveled so far. They just went around in circles. The farthest was to go to the mountains to chop wood and burn charcoal, and then they would have to go home, maybe a round trip which would be more than 100 miles of landscape. In the kiln fire on the ground in my hometown, I have seen countless morning and sunset glows in the sky. Because first Zhou Haijing, then Zhu Xian and Yu Kangmang, Qin Pingan realized what happened. In addition to having its own mirror, Luopa Mountain needs to use this matter to collect all kinds of news on Izhou Mountain. Therefore, in addition to someone starting to build an espionage agency in Luopa Mountain, the expense of watching the various fairy palaces is not a small sum of money. If you want to watch other fairy houses and other fairy tales, you have to buy mountain spirit artifacts. Fortunately, apart from paying for it, Zhu Lian, Mi De Jiangxian and Qin Lingjun are all very suitable for this. People are among the dragons and phoenixes. The guarding formation of Luopa Mountain is both offensive and defensive. There is already the true figure of the 5 sacred mountains of Lao Guanzhou, plus a picture of the sword fairy hanging in the old mountain shrine on the top of the mountain. This trip to the barren hinterland has yielded a lot. Only talking about the Jade City of the Cloud Pattern Dynasty, Qin Pingan got the 12 flying swords from the Emperor Yi Bao, who was named One Step. With the addition of the formation map gifted by Taiping Mountain, the attacking sword formation built in the Patriarch Hall of Jisei Peak on the Luopa Mountain in the future is not weak. If you can kill Yupu, you can frighten the immortals. Just the thought of spending money everywhere makes a hero short of breath. Fortunately, Qin Pingan remembers that he seems to be an anonymous guest of the Liu family in Ai Aizhou. If you are named, you need to show your face. Kaching will click every few years. If you are not named, you don't have to pay attention to this. It is almost equivalent to not giving money for nothing. On the side of Xiaomo, with ingenuity and skill on the cloud road, he began to weave a pair of sneaky clouds, snow white in luster, and his rank is not low at first glance. Above the sea of clouds, Qin Pingan asked casually, Xiaomo, when do you think the Wei and Jin dynasties can enter the Ascension realm? Xiaomo thought for a while. Wei Dejiangxian's aptitude is still quite good and he has got that chance again. If he doesn't fight, he doesn't strengthen his mind in the arena of life and death, and he doesn't fight for a few games with those with higher sword skills. Only after 400 or 500 years of water milling time can we see the bottleneck of the Earth Fairy. Having said that, Xiaomo hurriedly changed his words. This time is different from the past, so I have to call it a fairyland. Qin Pingan asked, are all the Earth immortals in ancient times so powerful? Xiaomo smiled and said, in fact it is not too strong, but it is definitely not weak. It is extremely difficult for the Earth immortal to ascend to the sky. It is only the first pass, which is equivalent to the sword cultivation sword at the peak of the fairyland today. After that there were 2 more passes waiting. According to legend, one of them involved the Taoist Xinxing, which seemed rather illusory. Therefore, even if there were those 2 ascending platforms, most of the Earth immortals did not dare to go up, as if they were seeking their own death. If you wait until the immortal gods in the world decay just to continue their lives and then risk a fight, they will die, so there is a helpless paradox in the middle, which will eventually make the men and women of the Earth immortal at that time. The number of successful climbs is extremely limited. When Xiaomo was boring when he didn't practice swordsmanship, he would sit near the ascending platform and watch others ascend to the sky. Many times he never saw anyone walk to the highest heaven gate with his own eyes. Without exception, he fell in the middle. Now those Taoist skins and souls are like flowers blooming. They practice hard and in the end they just add a majestic rain to the world. Anyway, I think it's a pity. If Wei Jinxing were in that year, it is estimated that he could successfully ascend to the top of the platform. Qin Pingan smiled and said, it's not difficult to make a soaring realm just by relying on Wei Dejiangxian's arrogance in buying wine. Regarding the Wanyan pine tree named Chongqing, Wei Jin, who was a monk with a single seedling on Xianxia, actually had a headache. If it were not for the involvement of ancient pine and mountain roots, which would be extremely difficult to transplant, the Wei and Jin dynasty would have allowed the big salamander Go Ulfshuritan, or Wen Qingfeng to move away. Otherwise, it will only make Fengxue Temple tired of dealing with those human relations, because there are too many dignitaries to ask for the branches, leaves and bark of this 10,000-year-old pine, whether it is an ordinary woman at the foot of the mountain or the mountain has not yet cut the red dragon. The female nuns boil medicine with Wanyin song, are an excellent fairy medicine for one party. However, when encountering the various forces who came to buy this thing, Fengxue Temple did not promise outsiders once, and it seemed extremely unkind in this matter. Although the Wei Jin and the suzerain have said twice, when he is not practicing in the mountains, the Patriarch Hall can dispose of this long love casually. In fact, the years of Wei and Jin's practice in Fengxue Temple, after the first descent from the mountain, the number of days added together is only a handful, otherwise it would not even be in the closed life and death of the Yuaning realm, and Wei and Jin would not be in their own mountains. So Wei and Jin couldn't help but wonder if Fengxue Temple was unwilling to sell Wanyin pine, deliberately using itself as a shield? Last time I returned to Fengxue Temple, Wei Jin had the idea to accept a nominal disciple? I don't get close to Fengxue Temple anymore, but the line of Xianxia is always passed on. So before reuniting at the Great Wall of Sword Qi, the downfall Shan Kiching of Wei and Jin asked the mountain master to help pay attention to whether there is a suitable sword repair embryo. The Wei and Jin dynasties had a little requirement. The aptitude for cultivation can be average, but the child must be born in Aquarius. After all, he is the first disciple. As for the future disciples, the Wei and Jin dynasty still had to choose them by themselves. Therefore, in addition to letting Qin Pingon help select the disciples, he also discussed with Qin Pingon. If you have an idea about the ancient pine, you should go to Fengxue Temple to buy it yourself. Besides, he has already agreed to this matter in the Wei and Jin dynasties, so as long as Feng Shuimiao has no objection, and Luopa Mountain can afford the money, and the ancient pine can migrate to Luopa Mountain for a price. However, Qin Pingon did not have such an idea. Of course, it was not that he was not greedy and heartless, but the Fengxue Temple was very likely to wait for the success of the refining of the Wanyin pine tree. The temple's guarding mountain is enshrined. Especially when the old ape of Xingyang Mountain died, Aquarius once again vacated an upper 5-spirit monster, and Fengxue Temple was even more unlikely to sell the hopeful Wanyin pine on that avenue. Moreover, since Gusong is called Chongqing, there must be some unknown origin. Naturally, Qin Pingon didn't need to go to Fengxue Temple to make himself boring. On the Lichuan ferry, Gan Yi did not look back for a long time. Now Izhou monks are all regretting something, but it is a pity that Wei Dajiangxian of Fengxue Temple did not bring 1 or 2 sword fairy embryos from the Great Wall of Jianqi to Aquarius. Regardless of how the rest of the 7 continents in the Hauran world look at these children from foreign land, only Aquarius Island and Beiju Luzhou they can walk sideways. The monks on the mountains on the 2 continents adjacent to the north and south are their protectors. Gan Yi actually wanted to ask a question just now, whether there is a young sword repairer from the Great Wall of Jianqi on Qinshan's Luopa Mountain, practicing in the mountain. It's just this kind of thing. She is not a sword repairer, naturally it is not suitable to ask. Before moving, Gan Yi smiled, full of style. Ah, Master Hermit has taken his own ferry. You can show off with others when you look back. Go drinking. In the city of Dali, early in the morning, the preface of Hongshuan Temple Xuanxiu once again came to the Rinyun Iyun Tower, and sent some newspapers from the 6 official offices of the imperial court to Mr. Chen. After Qin Pingon returned to the capital last night, he found that Ning Yao was still in the inn's retreat. Qin Pingon read the book for a night in the book building, while Xiao Imo hung up the innocence card, then used the blindfold method and walked around casually. After returning to the alley in the brightly lit capital city, I stayed in the courtyard outside and knit a few Tsingyi robes. Worried about following the sun to the side of Luopa Mountain, not enough preparations for the meeting ceremony. Qin Pingon took Xiao Imo out of the alley to meet Sun Chu. Sun Chu discovered that today Mr. Chen had an extra young-looking entourage than last time. Sun Chu only knew that the other party was called Xiao Imo, who was worshipped by Luopa Mountain. He is a very friendly and easygoing teacher on the mountain. Qin Pingon put the mansion in his sleeve, and according to the agreement he and Xuanxiu would go to a famous tourist attraction in Beijing. A group of people walked to the two sides of the street more than 1 mile long. Rare books, calligraphy and painting of the past dynasties, pen, ink, paper and inkstone, rare antiques, everything. It used to be an official kiln, which was used to make glazed tiles and blue gold bricks for alchemy. Nowadays 200- or 300-year-old shops abound on this street. This is a bit good. They all pay attention to repeat customers. No one wants to smash their own golden signs. Even if it is inevitable that some shops bully customers, they are fakes. There are very few fakes. In this place where the capital is elegantly visited, in the final analysis, there is no money in the pocket and the pocket is not enough. When you come here, you can only stare at it and be destined to come empty-handed and return empty-handed. Qin Pingan got the hint of Sun Zubin's eyes and bought the 3 favorite books, all of them paper like white jade, which can be regarded as rare books. Ordinary scholars are like seeing a beautiful woman on the road, and you really can only look at it, not touch it. Qin Pingan finally gave Sun Chu 6 books. 3 books are recorded on the account of Honghe Temple, about 280 taels of silver. The other 3 were Qin Ping's own pockets and were given to this young official who was in the same year as Chao Qingqing. On the way back to Renyun Tower, Xianxia hesitated and hesitated, still asking in his heart, "Mr. Qin is not curious why I am a Taoist?" Of course, with Mr. Chen's cultivation base and vision, he must have seen through this matter a long time ago. Qin Pingan smiled and said, "We don't need to go into each other's fate. The Sevuing realm in his 30s is actually not low. In the former Aquarius Island, the cultivators of the middle 5 realms were all gods and great demons." Qin Pingan suppressed a smile and asked, "Don't you know that Chao Sunny is a fellow like you?" Xianxia was dull and speechless, shook his head and said, "I haven't seen it." Qin Pingan said, "Also, if you meet again in the future, you can have an extra topic and talk about spiritual practice." Xianxia couldn't help muttering in a low voice, "Good fellow, pretend to be poor with me." Seeing Mr. Chen's playful gaze, Xianxia was a little embarrassed. "Mr. Chen, unlike Chao Sunny, I am a really poor person who can't keep money when I was young." Qin Pingan quipped, "After all, you are mostly an official. The article hates your fate. You don't have money. It's okay if you don't have money. In the future you will be a high official, by the way. In the future I will come to the capital and have an official backing." It's an interesting dumb. Unlike his friend Chao Sunny, who was in the same year of the imperial examination, although Xianxia was a second-class scholar, his ranking was very low, so he started low in the officialdom, otherwise he would not be thrown into the Xiajiqing Yamen outside the 6 branches of Honghu Temple. Xianxia really didn't think he could be a high official. And even if the official hat is bigger, does it work on Mr. Chen's side? Sun Chu hesitated again for a long time. "My master, he said he knew Mr. Chen very early." Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Can you ask which expert it is?" Sun Chu said, "The master is the priest of the Ministry of Rites offering sacrifices to the officials of the Qing dynasty." Qin Pingan was stunned immediately. That was the case. Among the many officials in the Dali officialdom, 3 positions are the most important: the official department of the test of merit, the department of military elections and the department of rituals. Although they are only the official body of the 5th grade, they have great authority, especially the preacher of Xianxia, the mentor who paid homage to the officials of the Ministry of Rites, is also in charge of evaluating the merits and demerits of all the landscape gods in Dali, so he has the reputation of Little Heaven Official on the mountain. This old doctor who has been lying in this official position for many years seems to have an old friendship with Li Jin, the water of the Chongtan River. The last time I showed up, I visited Red Candle Town in person to find the trouble of the Yuya River God Empress who caused the trouble. It's just that this kind of official, like the Superintendent Chao Gingxin in his hometown, is not suitable for proactive friendship. In Qin Pingan's view, what a person calls clearly reasoning is nothing more than knowing and stopping. It lies in knowing what, but also in not doing. Sun Chu accompanied Qin Pingan to the entrance of the inn near an alley. Throughout the journey, Xianxia always remembered the words of Hongshu Temple and asked the same question twice. Cui Yang, the master of the country, seemed to be not very concerned about the staff of the old man Guan, as well as the ritual department. As for the deserted yamen like Honghu Temple, they are even more faceless. However, the National Normal University has always been extremely concerned about the Armory Department of the Ministry of War, as well as the departments of the Ministry of Households and the Ministry of Industry. Therefore, Arsenal Mukosi is said to be the most likely to lose office, or even lose his head. In addition, it is said that even small officials such as the heads of households and labor ministries will personally review their resumes. If the Jima official is like this, let alone the promotion and expatriation of the two divisions. Sun Chu is not sure about one thing now because of his master's relationship with the officialdom of Hongxi Temple. Has he already fallen into the eyes of the national teacher? Qin Pingon returned the wooden box containing the flying sword to Sun Chu and said with a smile, "The diaries which I borrowed twice with Hongxu Temple before I leave the capital, will give it to Lu La who guards the alley." Ben just asks him directly. Sun's interesting work is thankful. Because I know that Mr. Qin is here to help himself in the capital, without showing the mountains and water, creating an extra road. A monk who was responsible for guarding the mansion of the national teacher seemed to be unimportant if Xianxia knew whether he knew him or not. But it's actually very important. Xiaomo is the one who bought the most books today. He went to the Xianxia Inn recommended by the sun last night. Just like the ferry on the mountain, there will be a place similar to a pawn shop, which is convenient for the trainer who stays in the inn to convert the ferry money. Xiaomo gave his son 3 small summer coins, which were converted into snowflake money, and a large stack of silver bills, as well as some gold leaves and silver ingots necessary to walk the rivers and lakes. Especially Xiaomo specifically asked the inn to help give himself a large bag of golden melon seeds. As I arrived at Luopa Mountain, this thing was reused. At first, the woman who claimed to be the treasurer of the inn was not reluctant, because the fancy stuff like golden melon seeds is really not common. Most of them are gifts given to the younger generation by the parents of wealthy people. Not to mention the monks on the mountains, they are the people of the rivers and lakes away from home who needs this stuff. Just waiting for the young monk named Xiaomo to say that she was an entourage of Lord Qin Shan. Without a word, Gayan melted a dozen gold ingots and squeezed out a bag of gold melon seeds with her own hands. In the end, she refused to live or die. Collect money. Today, in addition to the classics of Zhuzi Baijia, Xiaomo also bought a lot of miscellaneous books. Everyone's poems, literates notes, ghosts, and even some transcripts of official articles compiled into books, and some art-making books that are said to be martial arts secrets on the academic stage. Qin Pingon quipped. "Why, do you still want to be an official through the imperial examination? Then some are busy. The county examination and the government examination first become a talented student. And then the Chiwei Township examination is held every 3 years. Jingxing Chunwei will test, become a Jinshi, and finally have the palace test. It is step by step, and there are many gates, just like a carp jumping into a dragon gate. However, if you really have this idea, it is also a good thing. Can be taught by Chao Sunny to teach you. It is more reliable than buying these so-called secrets for craftsmanship and policy theory. It's just the Jinshi of the Dali court. It is indeed the most difficult to get. It is not one of them. Can be said that it is the most golden Jinshi and the highest in the entire Haoranjujo. Once there are too many people, the seeds of reading from the vassal countries will gather here. In addition, there are too many questions on the Ministry of Rights, and there is no fixed number of paths. On the contrary, the small countries south of Aquarius Island have issued some official books. There are many rules and regulations. There must be more than a dozen books. It's a shortcut and it's useful if you learn it by heart. Of course, this move was criticized by some well-learned Confucian scholars, and it was filled with righteous indignation. There is a saying that the official comprehended the book and said it was dead. So Xiaoma, if you really want to be a champion, you can go to accompany a country south of the capital and stay for a little 10 years. There, the family members will open the Mongolian education name, that is, practice calligraphy. After that, go to the school and get in touch with the Mongolian learning books. Endorsement of Chinese characters. Rich people go to their private school, and children who don't have money go to the village school. As long as the family is not too poor, they are generally affordable. After all, there is a place to read, and then they start studying classics. Xiaomo kept listening to the son's whisper. Qin Pingon found that Xiaomo's curious eyes seemed to wonder why he was so concerned about this matter. Qin Pingon nodded and smiled. That's right, I did think about taking part in the imperial examination. When I went out for a long trip for the second time in my spare time practicing boxing, I really read through a lot of related books. When you get the status of a child, you will be satisfied with the goal of becoming a master of Juren. It's the silver Jinshi and Jin Juren. Of course it doesn't matter now anyway, there is Chao Sunny among the students. Xiao Mo sighed. It wasn't that he really had any thoughts about the fame of the imperial examination, but Xiao Mo couldn't imagine that the books and knowledge of the world today are so cheap that they are simply worthless. Back in those days, how rare and valuable was a book full of words in the world. So Xiao Mo had an idea, and when he arrived at Luopa Mountain he decided to build a book building by himself, named Wanwan Building. Of course, it is best to let the sun to help choose a good name. Xiao Mo was straightforward and immediately said the matter in his heart. Without thinking about it, Qin Pingon blurted out, "You can call Liangguang Gran Lu." Xiao Mo briefly checked the hundreds of famous poetry collections in Xinhu Lake, and suddenly realized, wonderful. As Jian Xiaoyahao collects books. There is a cloud in the ancient poem, and the book and sword are boundless. The book and the sword are at a loss. 2 dazed floors. Qin Pingon casually said, "Of course you can use this name or not, you can figure it out." Xiao Mo said cheerfully, "My son, the name of this bookstore is so good that Xiao Mo is reluctant to make it public." As a result, the son squinted his eyes. Xiao Mo immediately said with interest, "Then use it, it's not as good as the others." In the night, the restaurants on both sides of the Changpu River stretched all the way up and down. Lanterns and festoons, lively and noisy, one after another, wine orders, box-guessing sounds like breaking windows and graceful singing followed. According to legend, some people like to drink and don't need money. From evening to early morning in a place like Changpu River, you can drink 4 or 5 drinks with just a little step. Today, a child of the Guan family in Izhou who rarely comes here to drink. It is rare to save a very private wine bureau. After pulling Jing Quan, who is both a colleague and not a friend, after leaving the yamen, the two went straight to the Changpu River. Guan Yiran and Jing Quan, the origins of the two are completely different, which can be regarded as the difference between them, but now the official positions are the same. Although Guan Yiran has enough military exploits and an excellent official resume, he is an unsuspecting waiter candidate, but no matter what, Jing Quan, who is born in the Cold Clan, can serve as a Qing official in his early 30s and a few years old. He became one of the chief officials of the 18th Division of the Qing Department of the Household Department. This shows how broad the promotion of Dallas officialdom is. Someone in front touched his head and raised his head to curse. Turned out to be a bite of flying phlegm from the sky. Jing Quan whispered, "Yiran, I'm a little nervous. Seeing that Xianxia, what should I say so that I won't be cold?" Because Guan Yiran left Beijing to join the army very early, he was actually as unfamiliar with this place as Jing Quan, so he needed to ask people for directions. When he heard Jing Quan's question, he just smiled and said nothing. Jing Quan continued, "What are the taboos? Tell me quickly, don't pretend to be deaf and dumb here." Guan Yiran joked, "Tabs? Just one. By the time you can't drink enough, we Qin Jianxian didn't drink enough to enjoy ourselves. We lost our spirits and came back. We must bear your revenge when we look back." Jing Quan was still uneasy. Is it on the mountain so young so he doesn't have a temper? Waiting for me to make a fool of myself, are you looking a joke? Friends of friends are not as easy to get along with as expected. Guan Yiran rolled his eyes and said, "My husband, you have no energy, you don't come to officialdom. If a meal is served from beginning to end with proper speech and dripping water, then what shall we do at the wine table? Today's wine, it's different from the big and small wine bureaus you used to participate in. If you can't believe me and you see Qin Jianxian later, you will say that you never drink and just watch." Jing Quan is good at everything, but he is too cautious and can't let go of his hands and feet. I heard that he used to drink a small meat flour wine with a group of colleagues in the household department of about the same age. Jing Quan would straighten up. "Pull, sit tightly, if there is a woman snuggling, it is like facing an enemy." After that, the two met an acquaintance in a blue shirt, long coat and cloth shoes. Standing at the door of a restaurant, it seemed to be waiting for them. Jing Quan recognized the other party at a glance. He was the former foreigner who was sitting with Guan Yiran and drinking tea inside the yamen of the household department. What's more, it was not long after we met at the government office last time, and the other party was still someone who could joke with Guan Yiran casually. Let Jing Quan remember deeply. It seems that this person has been mistaken for a shopkeeper who is soliciting business at the door, and a customer in front of him actually started asking him something. The man was not annoyed, smiled and stretched out his hand towards the restaurant. Yomo was helping to show the way. Guan Yiran quickly stepped forward and glanced at the restaurant sign. "Tissy say, It's really good for picking the ground. There are more than 100 restaurants, and this one has the best drinks. Qin Pingon smiled and said, the cost of a meal is not low. Guan Yiran waved his hand and said, go next door, go next door. The Lord Jing beside me likes to eat meat and not vegetarian. Qin Pingon smiled and looked at the young and promising Hubu doctor. According to Guan Yiran, this person was also in charge of the fish scales at the north stall of the Hubu. In fact, when we met last time, Qin Pingon found that behind this young official, there were as many as 6 red lanterns hung by various gods and gods. On the lanterns, there were all the words secretly made by certain mansion and temple, so he would let this adult doctor appear to be rich in cultural luck in the eyes of the hopeful man. At the same time, even if this person is alone in the mountains and rivers, walking in the mountains and old forests, he will avoid evil, ghostly and timid, and can make the landscape spirits take the initiative to detour. Jing Quan hurriedly said, it's fine here. Qin Pingon smiled and said, my doctor, are you sure you don't change the restaurant? Say it in advance. If my doctor is polite with me, you'll be really welcome. Seeing that none of them moved as if the man in the green shirt was waiting for him to change his mind, Jing Quan had to lower his voice, and asked Guan Yi in confusion, when will the Qin Jianxian arrive? Guan Yiran held back a smile and raised his finger to Qin Pingan. Qin Cage, let's Master Jing ask you something, when will Qin Jianxian arrive? Don't blame me for not reminding you, but don't let us wait for a long time. One of the chief officials of the dignified Qingli Shirsi, who is in charge of the money bags of the 3 states, is a little bit short. It is the governor of the border such as the governor of the county. He saw Master Jing in the household office and he was a little shorter. Among the 6 divisions of the Ministry of Households, the official Longguan is the most. Because he is in charge of the court's money bags, the official nickname is also the most. The Ministry of Households is the grandson's yamen, so the Longzhong office is the scolding office. What kind of saliva is there? As soon as Qin Pingon raised his foot, Guan Yiran jumped away and pointed at Qin Pingon. He laughed and said, my doctor, you are far away from the horizon, and this Qin clerk is the one you are going to drink tonight. Jing Quan was stunned, wishing to dig a hole and drill down, so he had to pay a salute to the sword fairy and apologize at the same time. Master Qin, I was in the yamen before, so I was offended. Previously in Guan Yiran this house. The other party claimed to be the younger brother of Master Guan from the rivers and lakes. As soon as he arrived in the capital, he rushed over to worship the mountain. It turns out that this Qin Jianxian speaks quite funny. I was so proud I couldn't beat him and I couldn't drink him. Wouldn't it be more fun to speak by yourself? Qin Pingon smiled and said, those who offend and don't have to be guilty will say nothing, and I will see you later on the drunk table. The 3 of them crossed the threshold together and walked into the restaurant. Qin Jianxian personally led the way. When they climbed the stairs one after another, Jing Quan secretly gave Guan Yiran an elbow, lowered his voice and laughed. Guan Yiran, are you cheap? Guan Yiran said solemnly, what are you talking about? This one in front of us is the sword fairy. When he arrived in a private room on the top floor, Qin Pingon brought his own drink. However, there is an unwritten rule in restaurants large and small on the Changpu River. Guests can bring their own drinks, but they still have to pay a sum of money and the prices vary. In fact, it is a special rule set for those gods on the mountain. Anyway, there is no shortage of silver for banqueting friends here, and they are not God's money. The so-called vegetarian before Guan Yiran is actually that in this restaurant, there is no young woman called Jiu Ling, who helps the guests do the warm wine and pours, and there is no female musicians to add to the fun. Therefore, the taste of drinks here is notoriously weak in Beijing. After Guan Yiran took his seat, he smiled and said, Qin Cage, I sent me an ink stone before. I heard that it came from a waterside pit, right? Before Qin Pingon went to visit Guan Yiran and sent a copy of the inkstone to one party, Qin Pingon bullied the other party for not understanding the inside story, saying that it was the old pit of the Yanshan mountain in Yunku Fudi, and he casually named it a waterside pit. Gammy. Qin Pingon looked puzzled and said, otherwise. Guan Yiran sneered and said, don't talk about the old pits in that Yanshan mountain, they are the new pits, they don't seem to have any watersides. Chen's accountant gift-giving is very knowledgeable. Why, it was Qin Jianxian who took a lavish deal and spent a high price with Yunku Fudi. He directly contracted a site on that Yanshan mountain and named it Shipanking. He intends to resell our Aquarius Island so that it is convenient to sit on the land and start the price? This party copied the ink stone, but Guan Yiran's generosity was actually passed on to the master Xianxia, who was signed by his government. If it weren't for Ma Xianxia's 2 daughters, they would really follow their fathers too much. What Master Xianxia, after seeing it, Guan Yiran must have called Master Yu Zhang directly now. It's the granddaughter of the grandson of Hongyu Temple. That's a handsome water spirit. Therefore the young people in Ichi Lane and Cheer Street, whoever are a little bit courageous and see an old Xiqing with a very good temper on the road, like to cheekily call their father-in-law. Guan Yiran wrapped his arms around his chest. Qin Jianxian probably forgot about our household department and a fat inkstone service bureau? Qin Pingan smiled and said, I just said it casually, you take it seriously, hurry up and punish yourself for a cup. Guan Yiran tweeted, I like to beat and rake, don't you? Plates of dishes are served on the table, and Guan Yiran is responsible for pouring the wine, mostly chatting. Jing Quan didn't talk much, but he didn't drink less wine. Qin Pingan suddenly said, it's actually a good suggestion. When I look back, I'll discuss with Yingku Jiang to see if I can buy the 100-year purchase of that inkstone mountain. Didn't your household department happen to have an inkstone affairs department? I advise you not to make this money. The problem lies here. The Yankstone office is inevitable. There is a turtle grandson over there. He is very fierce to earn money. Guan Yiran shook his head and said, this inkstone affairs department sounds like a clean water sect, but it is actually very oily. Anyway, Jing Longzhong and I are very jealous. If it weren't for the bastard, I would really like to find a way out. Try to see if you can get a piece of the pie. Jing Quan smiled and said nothing. Guan Yiran stepped on the chair with one foot. He was joking and suddenly started cursing. This kid, who is also called Longju, is a piglet. He is in charge of the purchase of inkstones from other places, and he stretched out his hand for a long time. I can't support him. I usually speak with a big tone. I really feel that I'm the surname of the Shangzhou country. Lao Tzu is puzzled. Speaking of his dad, he is notoriously cautious and cautious. When he gets to this kid, he starts to lose his heart with lard earning money. He is notoriously ruthless. Jing Quan smiled and said, he is still very polite when he comes to your side. On the capital side, no matter how good the atmosphere is, there will always be a few flies and shit. Don't do things idiomatically, don't pay attention to people. To use the words of Guan Yiran, in this group of people is shameless. In Dali capital city, the official elder son of Ichi Lane and the seed brother of Cheer Street, the first-class ones like Guan Yiran, Chao Gingxin and Yuan Jingding, were thrown into the local government by the family, relying on their ancestors. Yin started in officialdom, but can rely on his true ability to gain a firm foothold and advance step by step with a bright future. Otherwise, like Lu Xuanmei, who joined the army early, fumbled and beaten in the forest of swords and the dead, counting his head on the belt of the trousers, relying on the solid military merits. Like Guan Yiran, he joined the army, served as a monk with the army for many years, and then transferred to the Dadu supervisor, which is even more heterogeneous. That's why there are so many old people in officialdom, and Guan Yiran only wears such a big official hat nowadays. Second-class officials can also be officials, but they are not big officials, and most of them are officials in Beijing. Whether they rely on imperial examinations or family favors, they can stand firm in the yamen. The third class is not doing business properly, but it is also considered to be safe and self-conscious, at least not to cause trouble to the family. The most inferior is proficient in all kinds of prostitution and gambling as long as it can be related to the prodigal. It is absolutely unambiguous. I am idle, I like to be jealous with others, I don't have the ability to fart, and I am bigger than the sky. Guan Yiran snorted, that's being polite to my last name. You see, he was polite to you when he met you? Did he look at you with his straight eyes? Jing Quan said, it's okay. Guan Yiran smiled and looked at Qin Pingan, then raised his finger to Jing Quan. Look, listen, your words are not leaking, let's understand, you're young, he's already an old oil man in the officialdom. If this guy is without a bright future, there will be no reason. Qin Pingan smiled and said, it doesn't matter how you speak. As long as there is no more alcohol left, the wine will be fine. As long as the wine is fine, the character will definitely be fine. Guan Yiran took it seriously and said, that's true. So Jing Quan had to drink again. Guan Yiran sighed, letting Jing Quan also take a good look at Qin Clerk's skills in persuading wine. His mother, it was on the side of Shujian Lake back then, It was really interlocking and the person who was invited into the wine urn didn't know it. Guan Yiran said abruptly, Jing Quan may be released. Jing Quan immediately shook his head and said, if there is nothing left in the character, say what he did. Guan Yiran rolled his eyes and said, fit your fart, carry it, and you kid will continue to carry it for me. It's all a certainty and you haven't been with me here. In our yamen you have to say on the official side, Guan Yiran has no acquaintances. Who dares to say that I have acquaintances? Jing Quan was a little helpless. Guan Yiran is really drinking too much. Otherwise this kind of statement is very inappropriate. Of course the more important thing is that Guan Yiran regards himself and Qin Pingan as his own. In the officialdom of Dali, who doesn't know the official surname Guan? Since all the officials have their surnames Guan, it is conceivable that there are so many protégés of the Guan family. The key is that Emperor Xian and Dang today have nothing to say about it. After all, Mr. Guan was one of the few officials who dared to talk back to Cui Guosher in person in his early years. When Guan Yiran retired from the post of Dadu supervisor and returned to the capital, he was unexpectedly not in the official or military department, but in the most unpleasant household department. This is in the officialdom, not to mention promotion, not even the level of promotion. It's a real relegation. Qin Pingan nodded, raised his wine glass and said with a smile, I wish the adult collaborator go out as an official for the benefit of one party and become a parent official who truly treats the people like a child. Jing Quan was originally worried that Guan Yiran would say more inside stories, but fortunately he just clicked and stopped, and it seemed that he still didn't really drink high. Not long ago the left servant of the household department called Jing Quan to ask questions and asked a lot of questions. Although there was no clear intention, Jing Quan knew that he was very likely to leave Beijing to become an official. And Master Xianxia is also considered to be very important to himself. But where he went, Jing Quan just had a few guesses. When Guan Yiran deliberately mentioned the matter on Qin Shan's his side, Jing Quan began to be somewhat certain. There are 10 places where he will be released as an official and county guard. Ding I stopped Huan, faded and apologized for the arrogant field Kyo Rubber Group meal animal husbandry. The time and place are favorable, and Jing Quan has all of them before he leaves Beijing to serve as a magistrate. Being an official in Longzhou is recognized as both a great risk and a great opportunity in the officialdom of Dai. Those who end badly like Wu Yuan and those who end well like Fu Yu. After a meal of wine, the three of them drank for almost an hour. In fact, afterwards Qin Pingan didn't try to persuade him to drink. Guan Yiran was fighting with Jing Quan at the wine table. After the two household officials walked out of the restaurant, they swayed and supported each other. They walked by the Changpu River watching the back of the steadily drifting green shirt. Jing Quan was envious, worthy of the sword immortal, and the amount of alcohol was really good. As soon as the cool breeze blew, the alcohol gas dissipated a bit. Jing Quan whispered, thanks. Guan Yiran hiccuped, when you get to the place do a few more good things. The local government is no more official than when we are in Beijing. There are more yamen here with strict rules and clear boundaries. Everyone who is an official knows about it. Just say that we are in Nangxinfeng over there. What is a doctor? It's just outside to do a lot of things. You have to rely on your conscience. It can be dispensable, you can do it or not. It can be clever or confused, you can nod or shake your head, you can know or not, you have to figure it out. Jing Quan, my grandfather once said that it is not easy to be an honest official with a clear conscience. It will only be more difficult to be an honest and good official. What is meant by being a good official is that you always feel uncomfortable in your heart. The two of them walked to the arch bridge. Guan Yiran staggered and quickly ran to the railing of the bridge, spitting wine against the Changpu River. Jing Quan, who had originally patted Guan Yi and then on his back, was estimated to be involved. But Jing Quan suddenly overwhelmed the river and followed Guan Yiran lying on the railing together. In the end the two of them disagreed and stopped. They turned and sat on the ground with their backs against the railing of the arch bridge and smiled at each other. Qin Pingan took a walk along a radiant river. In today's wine bureau, Qin Pingan did not bring Xiao, but just let him stroll around Changpu River. Xiao had nothing to do, so he bought a few lotus lanterns at the roadside stall, put them in the river and then moved slowly along with the lanterns. After just taking a few steps here, Xiao found that he could almost distinguish the natives from the capital city from the outsiders at a glance. The former has an unconcealed sturdiness. The younger, the more obvious it is. Even outsiders are dressed in luxurious clothes. There is still a bit of restraint in his expression. Xiaomo stood by the Changpu River looking at the river. Drain the water from the bamboo basket and pick up the poems of Inu from the ages. The horseshoe shook the ground, splashing out 100-year-old frontier. Xiaomo was stunned and he couldn't help but think of the accidental meeting 10,000 years ago. That existence with his hands sleeved looking at the world from the ascending platform that should have only been the Earth Fairy. The Great Rebellion is not the way, and slowly descended alone. The world. This word at that moment is not a noun just like a verb. It may be that he saw Xiaomo who was sitting not far from the ascending platform, and the existence looked at Xiaomo, then smiled at the convenience and stretched out his sleeves. At this time tonight, Qin Pingan was walking by the river and beckoned to Xiaomo not far away. Tonight's drinks were not drunk for nothing. Guaniran is a man who obeys the rules for the officials, so the previous mention of the guy who was messing around in the Inkstone Services Department was not a careless remark at all. It was not a rush on the wine table. Instead he was reminding Qin Pingan to say hello to his fellow Dong Xuejing, and to be more careful in dealing with him in the future. And he has been spotted by a handful of powerful children of the capital who are jealous of his business. It's not that the guy from the Inkstone Bureau of the Ministry of Households, who is not the surname of Shangshiguo, can really hurt Dong Xuejing. In fact, the other party does not even have the qualifications to wrestle with Dong Banqing, but many dudes in the capital also have their own hills. The head likes to hug each other and is in the same spirit. In the capital you may be a tortoise one by one, but as long as you get out of the capital and get to the place, it doesn't matter whether it is in the mountains or in the official and business circles. Once Dong Xuejing was targeted by the partnership, it was a lot of trouble after all. Of course, this is related to Dong Xuejing's closing the door to make money, which led to the fact that many of the official connections of Dolly are always not visible and have a certain relationship, which makes people feel like a soft persimmon. The world is so complicated, and whoever abides by the rules may not be able to keep others from committing a mess. It's like walking alone by the Changpu River and then a drunkard can't make way or hide. Xiaomo suppressed the extreme ups and downs in his heart and said in his own voice, "My son, there is a sneaky guy who just secretly looked at my son twice. The other party is an immortal just like Senior Lu, but he can fight more. I originally wanted to wait until 3 times to get him out. But the other party was very cautious, as if he was aware of my intentions in advance. The son was right, and sure enough, these fortune tellers must be treated with a higher level." Qin Pingan was a little surprised and a little helpless. After the fall, it would be difficult for him to take the lead. Qin Pingan thought for a while, a Taoist in the fairyland? It couldn't be Qizhen, the great heavenly monarch of divine sect. Xiexi from Beiju Luzhou is even more impossible. Someone who just passed by Aquarius Island? Or the direct disciple of Lu Qin? This person cultivated in the mountains of the old Baishuang dynasty for many years, and he was aliased as Chao Rong. The Taoist temple in the mountain that he left behind will be the next sect of Aquarius Island. Chao Rong once shined in the battlefield of Old Dragon City. A book of landscapes, flowers and birds in total was presented, forming a formation to protect the entire Old Dragon City. The 3 masters of Baiyujing each have a private seal, and the seals are printed on the 4 landscape painting albums. The Taojing master of the master is truly invincible. Yu Dozwen has no first and Wu has no second. Master Lu Chen's stone to today. There is also Dashuan Duguan's son Daicheng's, see Peach Blossom again. In addition, the 4 seals on the 4 flower and bird scrolls at the back also have great backgrounds. They are Fu Lu Yuxuan's singing blockbuster, Dragon Tiger Mountain Great Heavenly Master Zhao Tianlai's Young Phoenix, and Huolong's Real Chittering. And the white eyes of Cui Yong, the great teacher of the country. A middle-aged Taoist appeared in front of Qin Pingan and Xiaomo. It was Chao Rong. Chao Rong was very sincere and didn't use blinding methods. Chao Rong hit a Taoist inspector and asked with a smile, "Dare to ask the hidden official, poor Tao Master, how good is it now? Have you returned to Baiyujing?" Qin Pingan clasped his fists in return. "The juniors have met Chao Xianjun. If there is no accident, Master Lu has not returned to Qingming for the time being. He may have to take a trip to Hohot Island and Yunxia Mountain. Chao Xianjun can go to Yunxia Mountain to wait for Master Lu and meet him. The opportunity is greater." Chao Rong smiled bitterly. If Master does not want to take the initiative to find me, you will definitely not be able to see Master's face. Xiaomo glanced at Chao Rong. It seems that Lu Daoyu's ability to accept apprentices seems pretty good. Gu Qingsong, who was named Xianxia, made his son very respectful. In front of this, Taoism is not too low. Chao Rongxiao asked, "Hidden officer, who is this expert?" Xiaomo gave the other party a Taoist inspector, Dao Hao Shiju. Chao Xianjun is like fellow Lu Dao, you just call me Xiaomo. Chao Rong's heart tightened and he called the chief inspector, "I have seen Senior Shiju. The so-called Lu Daoyu of this person is naturally his own master. The first time I used my palm to view the mountains and rivers, I didn't notice it and didn't feel anything unusual the first time. Qin Pingon obviously didn't know that he was spying from a distance. The second time, in an instant, Chao Rong's heartstrings were tense, as if he was facing an enemy. It is still not from Qin Pingon, but from the subtle changes affected elsewhere in the Changpu River. Chao Rong hurriedly made an exception to derive a hexagram for himself, and the result was astonishing. The young monk, who was not in the slightest sense of superiority in front of him, not surprisingly, was an unknown ascension realm on the top of the mountain. Could it be that the Zhongtu Confucian temple secretly sent to Qin Pingan's protector? Chao Rong showed up tonight to ask the Master Lu Qin where he was going, and it didn't mean anything. Therefore I came and went in a hurry, and left with Qin Pingan and the senior Shiju. Xiaomo suddenly laughed and said, "Chao Xianjun, let me say a word, friendship is friendship and rules are rules. Similar things, don't take this as an example." Chao Rong nodded gently. When Chao Rongyun went away, Xiaomo asked, "My son, was it too insensitive to what I said just now? There is also the suspicion of relying on the old and selling the old?" Qin Pingon shook his head and smiled. "No, he is very immortal and he has great demeanor. Tonight's fairy Chao Rong. There is also the swordsman Pei Min that I met in Tongyi's Hao before. There are more and more strange people and strangers on these mountains." Qin Pingon lost his drunkenness and patted his sleeves. Xiaomo did so and then asked, "Is it the custom of the Beijing Wine Bureau again?" Qin Pingon nodded, decisively saying, "Of course." Sort of Coming Chapter 885. Qin Pingon and Xiaomo walked onto an arch bridge and stopped. On the Changpu River, there was a breeze, aquatic scales and golden light. Xiaomo asked, "Hi son, something on your mind?" Qin Pingon stretched out his hand to hold on to the railing. "I'm estimating how much money you can make when you open a restaurant here in a year." Xiaomo laughed dumbly. Gay Mai Xiao Yuan on Osmanthus Island, Yuang Cliff and Mayfly Shop in Chunlapu, and Longgongdong Tianfushui Island, which was purchased with only 80 raindrops. In addition, when Jiang Shangzhen was the sect master of the True Realm, he set aside 5 islands and gave an enclave to Luopa Mountain, but it was temporarily put under the name of Zenji. Of course, there was a secret record on the Lily Ministry. Therefore, Luopa Mountain can be in the bag at any time. Today Qin Pingon has a lot of private property. Qin Pingon turned his head and glanced at the follower in the yellow hat and blue shoes, jokingly said, "I will give you a hiking stick and a bamboo box. When you go out you will be more like a weak scholar who is studying abroad." Xiaomo nodded and said, "Then Xiaomo takes it seriously. If the son accidentally forgets this, Xiaomo will brazenly remind him." Qin Pingon said, "Lu Qi, who was returned to Haoran and Yangji back then, used spells to block her way back, preventing her from escaping into the ruins. Now she seems to be forbidden by the Confucian temple. In the Alchemy Furnaces volcano group, if you have the opportunity to travel the Middle-earth divine continent together in the future, I can take you to chat with her." Xiaomo thought for a while, raised his hand and pressed his hat. "Actually, there is nothing to reminisce about with Yang Ji. It's that Zhu annoying, he seems to be reckless in words and deeds, but in fact he is shrewd." In those days Xiaomo was relatively straightforward. All of his old friends have suffered losses in Zhu Wei's hands, and the suffering is not small, so this time Xiaomo woke up and originally planned to return to the earth. First try to gather the old 6 holes, and the second thing is to get the 2 friends together. To watch the battle I have to ask Zhu Wei to ask the sword. Said it was Wenjian, of course it was a siege to get rid of Zhu Wei. Otherwise why should Xiaomo pull 2 old friends? If you accidentally leak the sound of the wind and are blocked by Bai Zhe or Tuo Yueshan, and Zhu Wei can be saved, then look for another opportunity next time. Probably this is the unique style of action of the pinnacle throne in the wild world, that rebelliousness is carved in the bone. Qin Pingan smiled and said, "How heroic the ancestors of moving mountains are 1 to 3. Xiaomo was impressed when he heard this statement, and he was still very knowledgeable and able to speak. Qin Pingan said, "Xiaomo, let's go to the Xianxia inn of a monk from the earthly branch." Xiaomo nodded and said, "That's right. I can thank the shopkeeper girl and give her a robe that was woven last night. Son, is this appropriate?" Qin Pingan said, "It's not inappropriate to reach out and not hit the smiley person, let alone be a gift giver. If the other party does not accept it, you are all right anyway." During this trip to the city of Dali, the most important natal porcelain has already happened, and there is still an unexpected joy. I found out the Lu way of the ancestor of the Lu family in the Middle Earth. It is still the old hometown saying that bad things are not too early. Good things are not afraid of late. Qin Pingan will leave the capital as long as Ning Yao's retreat is over, but some things have to be finalized, such as Zhou Xian, the martial artist of the 9 realms. Her joining the earthly branch is a foregone conclusion. Her current hesitation is only due to her usual caution. But as long as Zhou Xian still wants to seek revenge with Yu Hong, who is the first-class worshipper of Dali, and is the kind of pleasing revenge, she will definitely join the earthly branch and find a card for herself that is more than the first-class innocence card of Xingbu Big Amulet. Furthermore, returning to Dali capital this time, Lu Jia asked himself for 2 seals, indicating the content of the seal, which must be Sword Immortal and National Hand. The patriarch of the Zhao family in Tianshui, the creator of a national pavilion and the well-deserved master of calligraphy, gave Lu Qi 2 calligraphy and calligraphy tube copybooks, as many as 22, especially the one Yunjiatsing Yi Tai, amazed. And Qin Pingan is nothing more than the seal of the 2 parties in return. Such a reward is indeed the more the better. Ning Yao was still in retreat and Qin Pingan stopped going to the next room to seal it, worrying about distracting her. But if he did this in Renyun Iyun Tower, Qin Pingan would be a bit awkward. It's not a laugh. After all, the calligraphy skills of Brother Cui Huang are well known to the world. It is one of the 3 beautiful things. In Xianxia Inn it is more suitable for seal carving. Leaving the brightly lit Changpu River and Xiaomo first walked to a relatively secluded alley, Qin Pingan used water and clouds to hide his figure. Yu Feng went to the Xianxia Inn. The 2 sides fell down and came to the entrance of the inn at the end of the alley, similar to the inn where the trainers stayed and rested. There are 7 or 8 places in Dali capital. Qin Pingan can pack tickets. This place must be the most deserted place in business. None of them. Xiaomo took the lead to walk outside the gate where there were 2 high-painted door gods posted by others, and gently clicked on the gilded beast title ring. After 3 slow taps, he waited for a long time before he walked out of the inn. The lady boss, female Tsai, is the ghost of the Golden Core realm. When Qin Pingan came here for the first time, this painter female ghost gave him a lot of prestige. Tonight Gayan saw Qin Pingan. She was obviously a ghost, but she was like a ghost. Qin Pingan quipped, "Changing the shopkeeper is really thrifty and housekeeping as always. I would like to buy a concierge for my inn and I didn't want to spend it. No wonder the business is so good." Gayan smiled far-fetched. "When I go back to Qinshanju, in fact, the inn has been looking for people, but I haven't found anyone I like. This is really not changing Yan Husu." Regarding the inn concierge and the maid, she had discussed with Han Zhoujin and Yu Yu. Han Zhoujin meant to find some decent female trainers as long as they are clever. The temperament is gentle and does not cause trouble, so you don't have to care too much about their looks, but Yu Yu said where he could do it. Of course, you have to find some coquettish women who can kill people with their breasts. In the end, the 2 sides did not reach a result. Gai Yen took the 2 to an idle courtyard. Xiao Mo gave Gayan a robe, which was placed in a pocket green bamboo tube. Gayan's eyes were very greedy and she accepted it without saying a word. Qin Pingan's original intention was to find the Prince Song Su or the young Go Xiun tonight, and let them tell the rest of the monks. I never thought that tonight 9 monks from the earthly branch line would soon gather together, like Guling and the little novice monk, who realized that they had received temporary news and hurriedly arrived from the Jingshi Daelu Academy and the Translation Bureau, respectively. As for Yuan Huajing, several of them all left the snail dojo inside the inn, and when they got here, they all looked at Qin Pingan with strange eyes. Because at the inn during the day I just got a confidential spy from the Rishui Ferry. There have been two veritable changes in the wild world. After Qin Qingdu, Long Jun and Guanzhao, three sword repairmen, 10,000 years later, the Great Wall of Sword Qi once again asked the sword and returned the gift to Yueshan. In the end, there was a mountain of Tuoyue that disappeared and disappeared. In addition, after Dong Sengeng dragged the moon to fall into the world, there was another round of bright moon and bright colors, and was moved to the Qingming world by several sword immortals. As a result, there is only one round of moons left in the sky today. Yu asked cautiously, Mr. Qin, right? The girl who has always been audacious used a vague statement. According to the espionage of Dolly, it seems that two Qin Pingon appeared in the world at the same time, one each in Howran and Barbarians. The key is that both of them are extremely high, or the kind that can't be higher. According to Qin Tian, the deduction from the prison may be the 14th realm in the legend. The only difference is that the Taoist Qin Pingon, wearing a lotus crown, carrying a sword, and a number of sword immortals went deep into the barren hinterland, while alone, the Qingshan sword immortal in Beipingzu in the lower reaches of the south did not carry the sword. Qin Pingon asked, "What?" Yu blinked. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "You say yes." Then Qin Pingon opened the door straight to the point. "I came here today to tell you three things. First, the rules remain the same. As long as it is within the rules set by Brother Cui, I will not interfere with your practice too much, and I will not point fingers at your outside affairs. But if you are willing to fly swords and spread your faith, I will not interfere too much with your practice. Feng and Luopishen ask for advice and practice welcome. Knowing everything is endless. Secondly, every 10 years or so, I will ask for a resume, income and expenditure with the Ministry of Rights and Penalties, and examine your practice results. Once anyone is in the Jade Pu realm, they can make an exception and not be included in the evaluation. Finally, the first two are not counted. I have the final say." The 9 earthly monks had no objections. No matter how proud he is, no matter how arrogant he is, facing this existence who once played them between applause, it is really not worth mentioning. Just like that Yuan Huajing who is very keen on winning and losing, now he has no desire to break his wrist with Qin Ping, and Qin Pingon said that he stayed here for a while and asked them to go to various places to continue their practice. As for the young monk who always stood behind Qin Pingon with a smile on his face, no one could see the depth of Taoism and no one dared to explore casually. It can only be learned from the landscape intelligence that came from the criminal ministry today that this humanity title, Shizhu, is called unfamiliar, and it is a new name dedicated to Luopishan. The stranger went to the palace with Qin Pingon not long ago. There is only so much news. Hearing Gayan said that the stranger came to the inn last night, claiming to be Qin Pingan's entourage, and begging for an extra bag of gold melon seeds in addition to the immortal money. It is also a weird thing that cannot be guessed by common sense. There are many mysterious things in the Luopa mountain, and the bottom is not bottomed. Now it is a consensus on the Aquarius mountain. It's like the worship of the mountain named Zhou Mili, which is the most hidden because in that ceremony, it seems that there is only the right guardian of the Luopishan mountain, who is alone in the cultivation realm, and the mountain is not exposed. It's terrible. Therefore, there are different opinions on how high the little girl is. Some say it was from the Yupu realm and some guess that it was an immortal earth fairy. Is it blind or is it flooded with brain? Can you live in the Luopa mountain where martial arts masters and Yuanying monks are not very valuable? Can you afford to protect the mountain? Besides, the young man in white with a mole on his eyebrows and the chief worshipper surnamed Zhou were obviously very respectful in the face of this right guardian. Sitting on the steps, Qin Pingon took out 2 pieces of plain seals from the nearby objects. Back then he partnered with Yan Zhuo to do business at Jianqi Great Wall, and left a lot of stone printing materials. Then sacrifice a sword fairy flying sword imitated by Hinjianshan Kalei. As for the imitation sword pine needle imitated from Gu Chui, Pei Min had already crushed it with 2 fingers. Qin Pingon held Kulei as a carving knife and began to seal the margin, which was exactly the content of the Yuan Jia Tsing Yi Tai, and the bottom was the word sword fairy at the end. As for the second seal of the national hand in the base paragraph, the side paragraph is the number in the family motto of the Zhao family in Tianshui. Qin Pingan's favorite is that the weather should be clear and high, the knowledge should be profound and far-reaching, and the standing should be strong and sincere. The color is suitable for softness and village. The seals of the 2 parties are respectively inscribed Qin Shirshi, and Luo Pashan Qin Pinyin, at the end of the side paragraph. It took quite an hour to Qin Pingon. If it is in the Great Wall of Jianqi because the seal has few side items, it is estimated that the 20-party seals will be available. Putting away the flying sword and coughing thunder, Qin Pingon held a seal in both hands, bowed his head and sighed lightly, blowing away some debris and dust in the gap between the seals, and raising his head with a smile. This is worthless. So. Xiaomo said, the sun is too modest. Putting the 2 seals into his sleeve, Qin Pingon took out a white jade Ganoderma lucidum. Seeing that Xiaomo was curiously looking at the 2 lines of inscriptions, he simply handed it to Xiaomo. Qin Pingon smiled and explained, I came to the inn earlier to perform the exercises. I learned from the old owner of this white jade Ganoderma lucidum. Seeing that the inscription had a beautiful meaning, Xiaomo couldn't help but praise it. 1,000 years of shining and flawless people, the home of Baishizhilan Youxiang. It's a perfect match for my son. Such a gift is considered a realm. Therefore the immortal master with a generous shot must meet him if he has a chance in the future. Qin Pingon learned from the cloud and water body of the immortal Xianxia in the Jiuzhen Immortal Pavilion. Xianxia also has a magical technique that presses the bottom of the box. It has the reputation of water essence state on the mountain. It is a small world and is quite good. Qin Pingon, who traveled around Ao Pingzhou when he was in the 14th realm of Lucian's cultivation, was not idle at all, making the best use of everything, not wasting the least, and found a few pictures from the Xinhu bookstore. The time scroll of the fighting method, the stones of other mountains can be used to attack jade, the avenues can be deduced, and this method can be evolved. The water essence created by Yunyi is already a bit like a god. This is compared to pushing the secrets of the Dragon and Tiger Mountain Heavenly Master's mansion. That thunder game is much simpler. After Yuan Yang's battle on the river, the suspicious fairy Yunya, because he received a secret letter from Qin Pingon, Yunya quickly replied with a respectful letter, sending a piece of white jade Ganoderma lucidum of semi-immortal rank with merit. Forest. When he travels to the Middle-earth continent in the future, if Qin Pingon has a conflict with someone, sincerely say I am not Yunli and no one believes it. Xiaomo returned the white jade Ganoderma lucidum to Qin Pingon. Qin Pingon held the white jade Ganoderma lucidum and gently tapped the palm of his hand. When the site selection for the next sect was completed, and a period of retreat and practice, in order to return to the nascent soul stage and the ending stage, Qin Pingon planned to take Lu Jinglong to travel through the vast world. The route is almost Beiju Luzhou Iashao Zhong to Shenzhou South Pasuzhou, and then to Friazhou all the way north to Jinjiazhou and Luxiazhou. In addition to the northern borders of Beiju Luzhou, Qin Pingon is already familiar with the roads, while Iashao, the Lu family of the god of wealth, and the Leigong temple of Peixiang are all going to be guests. As for Zhong to Shenzhou, there are more places to visit along the way, such as Longhushan Tianshifu Fulu Yuxuan's Laoqing Fudi, Suheidong Tianqing Shinshan, Chao Sis Duduan dynasty. Yupanshui was the mysterious dynasty of the supreme emperor. Not to mention the many victorious places recorded in the Shanhazi and the supplementary Book of Gods. Qin Pingon looked up, but there was a flash of light in the night not far away, and a cultivator seemed to be evading away from the wind, and then followed by a sword light, instantly pulling out 100-meter-long golden lightning. The trainer flees in a hurry, changing the route several times, still being wrapped around the ankle by that shadowy golden rope, and then one is violently pulled to the ground and the one who flees, and the one who is chasing is not a monk of the earth immortal. The place where Jian Guang and the Qi trainer fell together, only 1 mile away from the inn. Qin Pingon smiled and said, I'm idle and I'm idle. Let's see the excitement. In this well-regulated Dali capital, there are even Qi trainers who dare to volley and fight against others without authorization. Except for the royal worship of the Song family of Dei, the only people who can stay in the air are the owners of the innocent card recorded in the Department of Punishment of Dei. Like Qin Pingon, every time he travels in the capital he has to put on a piece of the Ministry of Justice's last innocence card to pretend. Moved with Xiaomo, shrank the mountains and rivers and came to the place where Jinguang fell. Dei capital occupies a huge area. The inn is neither rich nor expensive, only slightly better than Zhou Heijing's foothold in the capital. There seemed to be people fighting in groups on the street, and the 2 big gangs in Wenzhang confronted each other, seeing that they were all in the rivers and lakes. It doesn't look like he would go to a table for a drink after he finished his ruthless talk. It was going to be true. If the two groups of people are added together, even if you don't count the hidden piles that are secretly mixed in the flow of watching guests, there must be a number 140 or 50. Qin Pingon squatted on the wall of the outer wall of a house, with his shoulders shrunk, his arms folded like a farmer looking at the field. Xiao Imo sat aside and found that there were a lot of people coming here to watch the excitement in the nearby streets. He was not at all afraid of things. Instead of closing the door to hide from wrongs, he swarmed because the faraway training Qimon was Jianguang. Pulling back to the ground, the sound of falling to the ground was not small, and the two groups were confronting each other in the street, making it noisy. In the nearby house, even those who had been sleeping and resting had to be awakened. In the middle of the street, the man who sacrificed the flying sword was a small old man in brocade clothes. After holding one hand, he pinched with and shook it gently. The victory is in hand, the old is in. On the top of the old man's head, the hair was sparse, like a dry field that hadn't grabbed the canal water. Only a few weeds were far away from each other. It's just a bit better than the rice field after the autumn harvest. But if you follow Xiaomo's rhetoric, it's this old predecessor who doesn't look amazing looking at Gupan Zixiong who can't be beaten. Since the old sword fairy did not take the flying sword, the golden light that the flying sword turned into still wrapped around the opponent's ankle. As the old man moved his fingers together, the young monk who was imprisoned by the sword light was full of sword energy at his ankle. The man showed pain on his face, sweat oozing from his forehead, but he didn't beg for mercy, but stared at the old man fiercely. Xiao Imo glanced at the confrontation between the two groups of people on the street and asked, "My son, it was in the middle of the night. If you try to provoke and disturb the people like this, the capital government will not care?" The master still didn't allow them to have trouble outside, so he could only sneak out to join in the fun. At the moment he looked up and saw that someone was already on the wall. One of Kong Wu's powerful young men asked, "Brother, where is this place?" Qin Pingon moved to Xiaomo's side to make some space and smiled, "Just us, you are free." One by one they rushed forward quickly towards the top of the wall, leaped high and climbed on the top of the wall with both hands, and then suddenly raised their breath and reached the top of the wall. It was a long simmering dispute between the sects of the Jianghu sect, and it was just twisted, and somehow it got involved with the gang of gods on the mountain like dumplings taking turns in the pot, a rare opportunity. The man asked in a low voice, "Brothers are also Lianjiazi?" Breathing calmly, "There is so much air. Of course if you can climb this high wall, you won't be the kind of scholar who can't hold a chicken." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "After a few days of practicing martial arts, I will be able to use martial arts skills. I am a trader at home and I need to travel north and south frequently, and I will be more stable." There was a young martial artist squatting next to the man, secretly turning his face and performing martial arts skills. He must be a rich man who had read a few broken books. The man continued to ask, "This brother, I have heard that Yangyuan Martial Arts Hall, our Wu Hall master. Although he is not very old, he is a well-known hero in the rivers and lakes of Jiangxi." Qin Pingon said, "I am ignorant. Regardless of whether the owner is a good man, the martial arts center must be short of money anyway. Otherwise, if you don't just see an individual on the road, you will have to be drawn into the group and be taken as a money bag. The Jianghu school needs a gold master. In fact, it needs a few big pilgrims in the shrines and temples of the gods of mountains and rivers." Seeing that the man seemed to be lacking in interest, the man still couldn't give up. "Big brother, the hero Sitiqioding, who is nicknamed Six-Armed Fist, has always heard of it? That is a famous martial arts master. It's the handle in the northern part of the capital. Some government officials have to ask his old man to come forward. The owner of the museum often drank with Situ heroes." Qin Pingon nodded. "I really heard that. In fact, the other party is not too old. He is a pure martial artist who got a sum of money for medicine from his master disciple. I don't know what this six-armed martial arts hero thinks. It seems that the bag of money was also enshrined. If Pei Qian had the same temper when he was a child, the hero would end up worrying. However, a golden martial artist mixed with the rivers and lakes is really enough. I think I strayed into the lotus root blessed land, a world, a master cultivator and a knife sharpener Lu Zong." They were not yet able to make the golden martial arts realm. Of course, this old master deliberately did it, coupled with the invisible suppression of the avenues of the blessed land. "Related?" The man asked, Brothers are outsiders, right? Qin Pingon put out his sleeves with both hands, turned his head and clasped his fists with a smile. Brother has a good eye. He is indeed a foreigner from a small place. His surname is Chao Mingma. The man nodded, didn't know how to pretend to understand, didn't know the words, so he didn't delay the address anyway. Qin Pingon smiled and added, "Spit moo." A handsome young man walked out of the street, twisting a hip flask with 2 fingers, drunk, wearing a crane cloak and drunk eyes. The man's eyes lit up. "Brother Chao, let's be the capital, hidden dragons and crouching tigers. If there is a group of old masters who have reached the pinnacle of martial arts, they will have the momentum of thunder, and they will not lose the gods on the mountains and the 4 beauties and the 4 big young masters, all talented, are the martial arts wizards such as this one, is one of the young masters, and Brother Chao are both foreigners, only 3 to 5 years in the capital. They have made a big name. It is said that I often go in and out of Cheer Street. Qi practitioners only have mountains in their eyes, and martial artists have only rivers and lakes in their eyes." The brothers and brothers beside the man, so many storytellers on flyovers and restaurants, didn't listen to them for nothing and didn't spend money in vain. A martial arts teenager on the wall twisted his ass, but he came out with a fart. The man turned his head and smiled and cursed, "Sounding fart is not stinky. It's better when you get to your side so you don't eat garlic cloves. Now it's okay, you can kill people with a fart. You guys just relax and listen." Said that the daughter of this family is weak now, and your moves so much, carefully scaring her soul away. "Lu Xiaokui, keep your mouth clean, what nonsense." It turned out that in the house 2 young girls were just about to take a ladder against the wall. A slender woman was twisting a kerchief, gently pressing her nose and frowning slightly. On the side, 2 girls who looked like maids were responsible for reaching out and supporting the ladder so that my lady could look at the scene outside. One of the maids was more pungent. At the moment, with her hands on her hips, she glared at the man on the wall who couldn't spit out ivory from the dog's mouth. Opposing. It's just that none of the 3 rushed people. Another maid hurriedly reminded, be quiet, let the master know we will not be able to eat, and we will also cause the young lady to be restrained." The man named Lu Xiaokui turned around and squatted and said with a smile, "Yeah, isn't this girl Fengxing? I heard that you hired a Taoist priest in front of you to do this. Now there is a life in the house. Is there any Taoist who took the initiative to go to the door to help exorcise evil spirits? Dudi? I don't look like a serious person. Don't be scammed. If you want me to say it, please ask our curator to help you watch the night at your house. If you sit there, you can rely on our curator. With a young energy, you must be scared of all dirty things and you don't need to spend any money." "How?" The maid took a sip. "Lu Xiaokui, you know what a fart besides a few caddies of tendon meat, what else? A small martial arts gym that only scams money, and can't care about things that can only be handled by the fairy master." Lu Xiaohui narrowed his smile, not annoying at all, and didn't return his mouth. He just craned his neck and looked at the girl's chest. From here the scenery was beautiful. While listening to Xiao Mo's retelling of the heartfelt conversations on the other side of the street, Qin Pingon turned his head and looked into the mansion. He was a little puzzled. Fortunately for the ordinary Zioguo Jingxi, there would indeed be some fox charms, ghost houses or licentiousness. Temple gods dominate, but in this big city there will be ghosts and ghosts wandering around. Except for the capital city god temple and the capital land temple, there are many other government officials here. Just the day and night wandering gods can make the spirits, ghosts, evil spirits and evil spirits unable to eat. How dare you to wander around here wantonly? This is like a little thief who does not enter the stream openly at the gate of the county office in broad daylight, cheating against the county lieutenant who specializes in catching theft. You arrest me, are you here to kill me? Inside this well-respected house, there is indeed a thread of an evil spirit, which is not stable but it is very shallow. It is necessary to bypass the places where the door gods are posted, and only linger in the shadows around the house. The yang energy is slightly heavier. You can let them give way. Qin Pingon looked at the expressions of the 3 women at the corner of the wall, and there was nothing unusual. This kind of situation occurs. One is that some people are weak, the soul is unstable and the yang is insufficient, and they also violate the taboo outside the home, which provokes the so-called dirty things to enter the door, and the other is that the family has a bad morality, and the house loses the shelter of the ancestors. It's just that this family doesn't look alike in either case. It was mostly the quagmire of the Taoist priest who went in with his left hand and the right hand. He looked for these wealthy portals with small family backgrounds, and made some noise first to scare people and cheat money. It's like the door can stop the evil spirits and evil spirits, but can't stop the ghosts and ghosts. The plump maid stretched out her hand to cover her chest, and stared fiercely at the row of sparrow-like sparrows on the wall. Among them were two raw faces, especially one of them. She was still looking into her courtyard at this moment. He turned his head and reminded him in a low voice, "Miss, I think that mate and Lu Xiaochu are not good people." Qin Pingon withdrew his gaze and smiled. Was implicated. Xiao Emo smiled and retorted, "The girl misunderstood my son is a gentleman." The girl sneered and said, "He, gentleman Liang Shang is right." At the same time Xiao Emo relayed his heartfelt words, "Yeah, really handsome and quite bookish. Could it be a foreigner who went to Beijing to rush for the exam?" Qin Pingon was puzzled. Xiao Emo explained with a smile, "It's the voice of the Fengshen girl." Qin Pingon silently records down the street the faces of those chi trainers and grandmasters of Jianghu, then asked, "Xiao Emo, can you find the guy who made the side money?" Xiao Emo nodded and said, "Easy." Qin Pingon said, "Then move the place, let's go to meet this Taoist priest who is making money in a good way." For some reason Qin Pingon was in the dark, always feeling that this was a temporary blessing and misfortune. Chance. It's not too big, it's dispensable and it's illusory. For Qin Pingon this kind of ups and downs of mood can be regarded as extremely rare. Even when encountering Sun Shuban, who claimed to be a poor ghost who couldn't keep money, Qin Pingon only realized afterwards that Xianxia was actually a reincarnation of a god. After being taken by Xiao Emo to a nearby ordinary inn, the two appeared outside a slightly shabby house out of thin air. The door bolt fell off by itself. Qin Pingon hesitated and pushed in. There was a young Taoist sitting cross-legged, his old Taoist robe was whitewashed, and he was reading a Taoist book at night with the lamp on. There was a bowl of wine on the table and 2 dishes to go with. When Qin Pingon and Xiao Emo showed up, that the young Taoist turned his head slowly and said with a calm expression, "It's finally here." Qin Pingon squinted his eyes when he heard this opening remark. The young Taoist priest still did not get up, but raised his head and looked at the 2 guys who had crossed the threshold, among them the young man in yellow hat and blue shoes, and closed the door. The young Taoist priest closed his hand with a rough engraved copy of Taoist classics, and sat so motionless as a mountain, leaning forward a little and hitting his head, the immeasurable heavenly master of Fuxing. Then put your fingers together, move an idle wine glass slightly forward on the table, and then stretch out a palm towards the 2 uninvited guests and smile freely. Yun Shui Dezhong, the visitors are guests, only turbid wine 1 cup, poor people, poor hospitality. As for the 2 of you, who is drinking depends on your own destiny. My son, he looks like a cultivator of the lower 5 realms, he looks calm on the surface, but his heartstrings trembled and he was very flustered. Xiao Emo said heartily, unless it's an ascendant monk who is better at hiding his identity than Lu Wei and Chao Rong, and he must be the peak of ascension and he prefers to play in the world. Qin Pingon sat blankly across the table from the young Taoist priest, took the wine glass, picked up the jug and poured himself a glass of wine silently. The young Taoist priest shook his head and smiled. The immortal on the mountain is really ignorant and the world is stubborn and stupid. I stretched out another finger and tapped the rim of my wine glass gently. I have been working for a long time, and it is not early to enter the mountain. Xiao Emo stood behind Qin Pingon and he was confused. Is this guy playing the front? Ouch, it hurts. Suddenly the young Taoist priest began to grin. It turned out that Qin Pingon came to him and grabbed one of his arms. Qin Pingon said, "We are members of the Yamen. You know what you have committed." The young Taoist face was pale and he said loudly, "I was wrong. I shouldn't go to that house to pretend to be a ghost." As soon as I heard that the 2 were government officials, the Taoist priest could no longer pretend to be, and the bamboo tube was like beans, and he told him the trick of being deceived and kidnapped. Of course, a vassal country from the central part of Dali does not have any Taoist salvation, let alone wearing a Taoist crown. After all, pretending to be a Taoist wandering around and a Taoist who pretends to be a certain Taoist family, the guilt is big and the difference is different. One is under the control of the imperial court, and the other is going to be under the control of the immortal master of the Taoist monk on the mountain. Qin Pingon let go and glanced at this bold young Taoist priest. No matter how he looked at it, he couldn't see the slightest way. The young Taoist priest cried and rubbed his arms. He felt painful and asked timidly, "Dare to ask the two officials, 30 taels of silver, how many boards have to be struck by the Yamen and Dali capital? How long will you eat in prison?" This guy, whose real name was Nianjing Zi Xianwei, and then named himself as Xianxian Dao Chief, was a habitual offender. Qin Pingon asked with a smile, "Master Zhou Xian, you earned 30 taels of silver in that ritual. How many taels are left on your body right now?" The young Taoist priest glanced at the books and hip flasks on the table. "The capital is expensive and there is not much left, only 7 or 8. Qin Pingon twitched the corner of his mouth, and the young Taoist priest immediately changed his words. "If you return to the official, if you add savings, you must have 20 taels of silver." Qin Pingon began to look around. The young Taoist sniffed his nose, his heart was cut and he trembled. "There is still a gold ingot." Xiaomo thought it was a bit funny and this kid didn't have a good time shit. It was just that Xiaomo had to take a step back subconsciously in an instant, but with his extremely tenacious Taoism he could not move. But Xiaomo came to Qin Pingon instead, just about to speak his heart. Never thought that Qin Pingon had already spoken. Said, "It's okay. I already know." Xiaomo sacrificed his life flying sword for the first time and it was all 4 of them. Qin Pingon reminded with his heartfelt voice, "Take the flying sword." Xiaomo hesitated to speak, but seeing his son's expression firm, he had to silently retract his sword. It turned out that the young man who pretended to be a Taoist priest had a wooden hairpin in his bun. The style was simple and unique. Xiaomo is so familiar with that Daozhan. Although the wooden hairpin on the head of the young Taoist priest in front of him is definitely not the one it was in the past, the same style alone has already shaken Xiaomo's heartstrings. Qin Pingon still sat on the spot, his expression unchanged. Probably this is the cause and effect that he personally beat that fairy hairpin city into 2 pieces in the wild world. "It seems that you have guessed the identity of the poor Dao." The young man smiled, stood up slowly, shook the sleeves of the 2 Dao robes and was about to speak, but he started to say, "Hey again, it hurts," his hand is about to break. The official is forgiving. No matter how good at observing words and feelings, no matter how clever tongue is nonsense, he can't hold back a word of pain. These officials are just reckless, they like to be rough and they are too innocent. Taking the Xianxian Taoist out of the inn, the young Taoist priest slung the package, and of course he did not forget to settle the room fee at the counter. The young official with a bad temper said that he was asked to live in a more spacious place. The young man sighed. The prison food was not delicious. Inexplicably, he gave him a piece of yellow paper talisman, saying it was a light talisman with yang qi, and asked him to go to that house tomorrow to post it at the entrance of the ancestral hall. "I thought it was going to the Yamen, but I didn't want to walk all the way." The young Taoist walked with sweat and finally came to an alley. The young Taoist stopped abruptly, looked panicked and took the initiative to take the package and hand it to it. The guy next to him, who called himself Chao Mo, fought with his teeth. "You can overdo it, don't commit any crimes. With that gold ingot, all my belongings are worth less than 100 taels of silver, so you can't commit murder." Speaking of later, the young people leaned back against the wall and they all cried a little bit. Lu Jia and Zhao Duanming stayed inside the Baiyu dojo watching this good scene outside the alley. The master and the disciple looked at each other. "Did Mr. Qin bring a living treasure back? You can keep the burden on your own. I don't like this little money. The year. Forget it, it's easier to call you Xianwei. As for the real name, I'll leave it." Qin Pingon waved his hand and said with a smile, "By the way, I am from the mountain. From now on you will follow me in cultivating." That sluggish and speechless immortal way, as if listening to a heavenly book, was uncertain in his heart. Could it be that there is a mountain and a mountain high? Is he a master of lies? What else does the other party do besides cheating money? The question is, what else can I do? I am not a woman. When I thought of this, Xian Wei glanced at that Chao Mo's entourage and suddenly felt sad and threw the burden to Chao Mo. He sat on the floor again. Killed and stopped moving. With a dark face, Qin Pingon had to raise one hand and from the palm of his palm he sacrificed the 5 thunder seal. The brilliance flowed, illuminating the lane. Xian Wei was taken aback and suddenly recovered. Malur picked up the baggage from the ground, slung it on his back and followed Chao Mo to the alley. The husband, even if he walked through the fire, his brows were not frowned. "Master Chao, Could it be that I was in the market and caught my Xian family's roots at a glance? Think I am the kind of manufacturable? Dare to ask which mountain mansion Zhou Xian came from? But the land fairy who can raise his hand to catch the moon and the stars in the legend? Master Zhou, why don't I call you master? The red tape of worshipping the teacher and worshipping the statues can be slowed down. Master, do I have brothers and sisters now? When will I be able to meet? Seeing that the on the mountain didn't talk to him, Xianwei touched his stomach, bit his scalp, changed his name to Master Zhou again and asked tentatively, "Is there anything to eat?" After walking all the way I was panicked with hunger. Qin Pingon took out the key, opened the door of the house and said with a smile, "Xiao Imo, go buy a supper and come back." Xiao Imo nodded silently, his figure disappeared in a flash. In the front yard, Qin Pingon asked Xianwei to live in a wing temporarily, so that he should not walk around casually and stay in the house honestly. Qin Pingon walked over to the alley again and chatted with the master and apprentice. After the sentence, he handed over the seals that had just been completed by the two parties to Lu Jia, who helped them to the patriarch of the Zhao family in Tianshui. Back in the front yard of the house, the young Taoist priest was devouring his head and Xiao Imo stood at the door. Qin Pingon glanced at the Taoist hairpin again and returned to the study building. Nothing happened overnight. After eating and drinking, Xianwei couldn't sleep until he finally fell asleep in a daze. The next day the young Taoist priest found that Xiao Imo had disappeared. He was indeed on the mountain. His temperament was uncertain and his whereabouts were mysterious. Only the guy who claimed to be Xiao Imo in the yard accompanied him to the house. Xianwei had a talk of his own and then gave his own lantern talisman to Master Zhou and posted it to the entrance of the ancestral hall, and it was all right. Then Xiao Imo grabbed him by the shoulders and only felt like clouds and fog, and when he looked at it he came to a Xianxia ferry crossing outside the capital Jinsudu, whose name is not very pleasing, but Xianwei knows why he named it that way. The Dali Frontier Army has fought many battles in the past 100 years. The reason why he walked all the way north to Dali capital by relying on a pair of feet and walking north to Dali capital. Isn't he sincerely fascinated by the invincibility of Dallas Iron Cavalry? It's just a penny that stumps the hero. If you really want to be rich, why bother to cheat and spend a lot of money at the restaurant on the Changpu River? Xiao Imo just asked Xianwei to stand where he was. The latter took a closer look and discovered that there was a fortune-telling booth in the distance. It was the Master Zhou who had changed his outfit, dressed in a green yarn robe, and there was only a lottery on the table. Here at the ferry it is the light of the sky. The stall at this moment actually has a business. She is an ordinary woman with 2 children. She is a young girl with similar eyebrows. The 3 of them are in the same position. Sitting on the bench in front of the stall. Standing next to him was an aged butler. Only a little further away, there seemed to be 2 burly men with sharp eyes. No doubt that they were in the nursing home. Xianwei still has this vision, whether the woman's tolerance or the 2 rebels' vigorous and powerful aura. In short, it is not an ordinary person, maybe it is a certain general in the capital. Teacher Zhou Xian is really powerful, Daoxing is indeed better than himself. Acknowledge a master, sincerely do not lose. Qin Pingon had previously traveled to Aquarius Island, and made a special trip to the hometown of General Su Gaoshan on the way. He never built a mansion to build a large tomb, and his family did not ascend to the sky. The family members only changed from the poor home to the worry-free farming and reading heirlooms. At this moment the fortune teller who claimed to be the Xianxian Dao chief was unsolving the lottery for the woman, which was used to calculate the trip. Fortunately it was a winning lottery. The woman listened carefully and her eyebrows were a little bit of joy. In addition to a pre-settled hexagram, the woman gave an extra 10 taels of silver. The young Taoist smiled and drew out a white jade lucky sign from his sleeve, then slapped his head and said that good deeds make a couple, and then he drew out another lucky sign saying it was a gift to the noble son. Fulu Onkong Ronghua Jichong, the income is satisfied and there is orchid fragrance for thousands of miles. The roots are luxuriant and the leaves are luxuriant, and the crops are rain-run. When the woman saw the lucky sign inscription, she was happy to accept it. She turned sideways and took out a snowflake money from an old embroidered bag, gently placed it on the table. I beg the chief Taoist to accept it. It's just that the young Taoist leader, who is good at talking, gently pushed the fairy money back and smiled and said, "Fortune is hard to buy. Madam does not need to be polite, just treat it as good and good." Xiaomo asked in his heart. Master, if you do this, will the Song clan have any ideas? Qin Pingon replied, then make them want to go. Xiaomo smiled and nodded slightly, because the two children beside the lady had a pair of red lanterns hanging behind him. There is a string of golden characters on each lantern, secretly made by Ji Sifeng Patriarch Hall, signed by Qin Pingon. Another seal is stamped with a private seal. Hidden official. The lady left the fortune-telling booth with a pair of children, but did not forget to let them say thank you to the young master. After walking some distance, the woman and the old housekeeper seemed to have a few words before she learned the truth. She suddenly turned her head and looked at it. The young Taoist master who is not the hostess has stood up, her arms are sleeved and her face is smiling. Waved goodbye to them. The woman stopped, she turned around and gave a blessing to the young man. The man took a step back and returned the gift. Although she was the first-class imperial wife of the Dei court, she didn't know much about the government and the women on the battlefield. In fact, it was only today that we knew that the last hermit of the Great Wall of Sorchi was the same as our Dei family. In the early morning the moon sets and the sun rises and the climate is fresh. Like a person walking at night wearing the stars and wearing the moon, it is already dawn. Sword of Coming Chapter 886. Xiaomo took Xianwei to the fortune-telling booth together. In Xianwei's view the stall was a bit shabby. There was only one table and one lotus and there was no cloth flags upright, this Chao said. Although Mo is an immortal teacher, he is not sophisticated enough to talk about Jianghu experience, nothing more. Since he is now a mess with Chao Mo, he will teach him unique skills for free. It's just that Xianwei had doubts again and couldn't help asking, Xiaomo, why didn't Xiaomo accept that fairy money in the end? If I'm not mistaken, it is the snowflake money commonly used by fairy people in the legendary mountains? Don't the gods on the mountain treat money as money so much? Xiaomo said, it's hard to give up good money, and those who can give up good money are the masters. Even if Xianwei had heard of the truth in these books that weren't for the best use, if he took it out and compiled it into a book, it could fill a few baskets, but wouldn't the money in his pocket be cleaner than his face? Seeing that Chao Mo was about to put away the lottery on the table, Xianwei immediately got anxious. Will he close the stall? How can making money be so sloppy? Xianwei sat down on the bench, took the pickup tube from Qin Pingon, shook the bamboo tube vigorously and shook out a bamboo stick. When he looked attentively, he muttered to himself as if he was talking to the Qingshan Taoist robe. Xianwei's expression was startled, sometimes frowned, sometimes nodded, occasionally asked and finally blushed, opened his voice and said with great excitement that the sign is strange, God, and immortal. Long is really a god. Xianwei stood up, punched a handsome Taoist chief, then took out the gold ingot from his sleeve, placed it on the table again, and asked the immortal chief to teach the cracking method. Xiaomo stood on the side, watching the second stunner embarrassed over there. Xiaomo had nothing to say and could only pretend not to know this person. In fact, Qin Pingon didn't say a word from start to finish. Looking at Xianwei's eager face, and then looking down at the gold ingot on the table, Qin Pingon rubbed his eyebrows and had a headache. This is not the streets and alleys of the city. It is a ferry crossing of the Xianxia. Just your trick. The acting skills are poor and you can't deceive people. You Xianwei is a half-hearted gas trainer anyway. As a result, this trip to the north, the wind and food, sleeps, and a meal of wine and meat are just like the Chinese New Year. But in the end he saved a gold ingot and I really can't blame others. As a grown-up, he is not as capable as Pei Qian when he was a child. Also impede myself to be a liar. Sure enough, the pedestrians on the road near the fortune-telling booth were not the immortal genealogist, or the sage cultivator, or the experienced old rivers and lakes. They all looked at the fairy with the eyes of a fool. The two scammers had to be short of money before they came here to pretend to be a ghost. Most of them are so poor that they can't get rid of the pot, so they can't choose their way in such a panic. It's like setting up a fortune-telling booth at the gate of the Heavenly Master's mansion on Longhu Mountain, playing wild chess among the colorful clouds in Baidi City. How much money can you make? Qin Pingon lifted his chin, and Xianwei also found that nearby pedestrians were intentionally or unintentionally away from the fortune-telling booth, so he had to put away the gold ingot and put it in the wing of the house with the package. He was worried that he would be caught by a thief. If you complain, you have to carry it with you to be at ease. Qin Pingon put the lottery made temporarily last night into his sleeves, and then reminded Xianwei that he could get up. Qin Pingon stretched out his hand and patted the tabletop, waved his sleeves again, and the tables and stools were scattered, empty. Xianwei was stunned. Is this the magic of the immortal family made out of nothing? Can I learn from Chao Mo? The three left the ferry and returned to the capital along a broad official road. Xianwei sighed and walked again. Qin Pingon glanced at Xianwei's hairpin and asked in his heart, Chao Mo, what do you think is the situation of this Xianwei now? Assuming that the fake Taoist of this famous year and name Xianwei is the first Taoist in the world, then according to the secret file on the side of the Summer Palace, this Taoist with great luck has already fallen in that field. In the battle of Ascend to the Sky, this matter is beyond doubt because when Qin Pingon returned to Haoran he asked Li Xing. Li Xing personally said that this senior was indeed dead. This Taoist man with great merit in the world died after the battle so that even the Taoist hairpin was left in the world, and was eventually picked up by the female founder of the fairy hairpin city, returned to Lingxiang on the earth of the world and then walked up. On the road of cultivation she sits on the blessed land of Yaoguang, but concentrates on trying to build a fairy hairpin city that is as high as the sky. Generally speaking, this Taoist should be reincarnated like a soldier. And the immortal way next to Qin Pingon at the moment, it is very likely that some of the soul remnants of that Taoist. The reincarnation of the gods of the old part of the ancient heavens can rely on pure divinity. This real body is like falling into a long sleep. Whether it is entrusted to a human or a monster monk, the skin of the decayed life and death, the divinity cannot be reduced or increased. The problem is that Xianwei is a cultivator, not a god. It is reasonable to say that the soldier solution that started 10,000 years ago with each reincarnation, the old souls will continue to disperse, and new souls will continue to be filled. The more it will only make the immortal way and others of later generations less and less like the earliest Taoist. Unless that Taoist in 10,000 years, in fact, there have been only a few or even one reincarnation of soldiers. Chao Mo was a little embarrassed. On this matter Chao Mo didn't dare to say anything nonsense. The sun asked you blind. When it comes to the reincarnation of the cultivator, Chao Mo is a real layman because 10,000 years ago, regardless of the human race or the monster race, the monks lived and died for almost one lifetime. Regarding the technique after 10,000 years and before 10,000 years, the heights before and after are roughly the same, and the difference is not too big. But it can be said that there are many types of qi practitioners today and the context is complicated. They only talk about the number and breadth, not talking about the pure killing power and the high level of Taoism. Compared with 10,000 years ago, it really requires a lot of spells. Qin Pingon nodded. It doesn't matter, just put the matter aside for now. In order to determine the identity and realm of Xianwei, he can't use those vicious methods to arrest his soul. Qin Pingon is neither willing nor daring to act like this. Besides, Xianwei really had a lot of connections with the Taoist person, or deliberately hid himself, for example, for the fairy hairpin city to find a place on his own side, and Qin Ping's current methods were really useless. However, Qin Pingon believed that this possibility was unlikely, and he used the heart of a villain to save the gentleman's belly. After all, the other party is a virtuous person who does not hesitate his own life and death to open the way for the world. Or is it that the other party uses some incredible secret method to deceive the sky through self-deception? Crossing the sea for 10,000 years? In addition, Qin Pingon also worried about whether it was Zhou's plan, or whether it was implicated in Zhouzi. If only according to Xianwei's own statement, it was because of a deep blessing when he was young. By coincidence, coupled with the smoke from the ancestral tomb, he picked up a fragment of a fairy book, and then began to abandon the text and cultivate the immortal. Therefore, Xianwei doesn't know the division of the mountains realm now, and can only know the scenery of some land gods through those ghosts. Xianwei is currently the Lujin realm of the lower five realms, which is the so-called remaining realm. Moreover, there are no preachers, no masters, no natal things. Xianwei has a little understanding of cultivation, and he is ignorant about the use of spiritual energy and spells. This fake Taoist deception guy has been used to the roads of Jianghu, seeing many immortals jumping, deceiving people and being deceived by others. The worst time was when he first went out. The scholar met soldiers and was there. In the wilderness and ridge, he encountered a group of trail-cutting bandits who had fallen into the grass. Because Xianwei was literate and spoke elegantly, he was arrested and worked as a dog-headed sergeant and Mr. Accountant for several months. They were mixed up and Xianwei fled down the mountain. At that time there was an extra plaque in the lobby. It was Xianhui's handwriting, the 4 characters of the list: God rewards hard work. In fact, this matter, the answer to this mystery, the best person in the world who can solve the puzzles for himself is the city lord of Baidi City, who has tried to prove that he is not the ancestor of Taoism. There was a saying in Haoran Mountain that at that time Jing Juzhong had not yet reached the 14th level, and his senior brother Cui Yang was also the first disciple of Wenxing, and the two sides had just played 10 rounds of colorful clouds. Don't learn to be immortal because you have shallow talents. Don't learn to embroider tigers if you are not extremely clever. Qin Pingan thought of a saying for no reason and said, a metaphor that Cui Dongshan once played. He was born as a man like a wooden boat, then reincarnated, his soul separated, he demolished the east wall to make up the west wall, stitched together, and over time how to distinguish the new. Are the two the same as the old boat? Xiao Mo immediately checked the Xinhu books habitually and asked, my son, does this belong to the debating technique of the famous family? Does it involve the righteous names of things? Qin Pingan nodded and said, like my husband, although he has a general perception of famous artists, he thinks this knowledge is easy to be sophistry, but he still feels sorry for the current situation of such declining famous artists. Must not be nothing. Xiao Mo hesitated for a moment and said frankly, I don't recommend that the son keep the Xianwei by his side. It is better to hand this person directly to the Confucian temple. There are too many accidents, and if anything happens, the consequences will be disastrous. It is obviously more secure to hand it over to the Zhongtu Confucian temple. Qin Pingan explained patiently, once I was accustomed to this kind of thing and the fun of practice apart from climbing up the boundary, it's still unknown and solving mysteries. Finally, and the most important thing, I don't think it's going to be the most important thing. If Wei pushes out from his side, he can avoid anything. It is very likely to be counterproductive. Those who are far away are often in front of you, and those who are close in front of you may actually be far away. Xiao Mo smiled and said, it's because I am narrow-minded, not as wide-minded as the sun. Qin Pingan said helplessly, then drink more. The sky and the earth are no bigger than a wine bowl. Xianwei raised his palm between his eyebrows and looked into the distance. There seemed to be a wine shop with a flag on the side of the road. Some wine bugs rebelled in his stomach. He quickly asked, Master Chow, are you hungry? On the side of Xiaomo, Xianwei took Chow Mo one by one, calling his name directly. But on Qin Pingan's side, Xianwei is still very particular, and it's up to people to order dishes. Qin Pingan glanced at the small wine shop that occupies a small area, and the content on the banner is written with a bit of immortality, and he dismissed the horse and turned his head and stayed behind forever. In fact, I noticed it when I came here. It's a place that sells fake wine. It's not a common heart. As long as it is the famous Xinjia wine on the mountain, it can be sold there, not to mention the Changchun Palace wine and the book Jianhu Wui wine, even the sweet-scented osmanthus stuffed from Lialongqing. The reason is that the price of wine is too cheap and there are really many people buying wine over there. One dared to sell, the other dared to drink. Xianwei was really greedy for the drink, and he was dragged by Xiao Mo to the house to post the talisman early in the morning. He was hungry now, and he continued to encourage Master Chow to go to the wine shop and sit for a while. He said that this kind of fish and dragon fairy is not certain. You can meet a strange person and stranger. If you meet each other, it will not be a good luck for the immortal family. Xianwei kept chattering as he walked, and then Qin Pingan dispelled the other party's thoughts with just one sentence, saying that drinking and eating are all right, you come to treat him. Xianwei immediately changed the subject. Master Chow, the book said that the sweet and golden syrup, the immortal fermented wine, the immortal fruit in the mountain, are all true? For example, the Jiaoli fire date and what 1,000-year Ganoderma lucidum bibimbap, 10,000 years of wild ginseng stewed old duck pot. Master Chow has tasted it. How does it taste? Qin Pingan was so angry that he was out of town all his life, whether it was rivers, lakes or mountains, and the expenses on food, clothing, housing and transportation were really rare. Seeing that Master Chow's face was unhappy, Xianwei stopped talking, glanced at the banner and said, it is really immortal. Generally speaking, there must be immortals drinking immortal brew, but it's a pity. Qin Ping's placement is deaf ears. Last night, Ning Yao told Qin Pingan, who turned a book in Rinyun Iyun Tower, that the retreat would end soon and there would be 2 days at most. Qin Pingan didn't let her worry, it was no less than a day or two. I just received a Feijin letter from Luapa Mountain not long ago. And I might have to attend a wedding banquet in the capital tomorrow. Xiao Imo patted Xianwei on the shoulder. Xianwei wondered, Xiao Imo, what do you do? Xiao Imo smiled and said, walk well, talking is tiring. Xianwei sighed. He was poor and short, and he was going to be taught by an entourage to be a man and do things. When Qin Pingan passed by the wine shop, he suddenly stopped and turned around and walked straight into the wine shop, because there was a man in white clothes who had a table alone and was drinking. He was really caught by Xianwei. Xing Juzhong raised his wine bowl and smiled. It's such a coincidence. Qin Pingan walked to the wine table, saluted with Xing Juzhong, shouted Mr. Xing, and just sat silently. There were 3 empty wine bowls on the wine table. Xing Juzhong was obviously waiting for his party to pass by the wine shop. Qin Pingan was sure that Xing Juzhong in his own eyes and the man in white in the eyes of many drinkers in the wine shop were 2 people. There is no need for Xing Juzhong to say anything. The puzzle in Qin Pingan's mind is half solved. Qin Pingan didn't think he was worthy of letting Xing Zhongzhong wait. It must be the immortal Wei beside him. Xianwei took his seat generously, but Xiao Imo stood behind Qin Pingan after helping to pour the wine. Because the other party didn't use blindness to himself, Xiao Imo knew the identity of the man in front of him and recognized it at a glance. Following Qin Pingan to Howren World, although it was not long before, Xiao Imo was very interested in collecting some news from the mountains. Of course, all of them were the pinnacles of Ascension Realm. Remember it silently. Xing Juzhong glanced at the immortal lieutenant at the same table and said, take the hairpin to scratch the wine, and the hairpin will be exhausted just like a person grinding ink. The body and name are destroyed and the eternal life will last forever. Xianwei is happy, good fellow. If you want to talk about these vain heads, I can't beat Master Chow, so I'm afraid of you. Twisting the wine bowl with 2 fingers without having to brew any words, the young Taoist priest started talking nonsense seriously, shaking the wine bowl gently, sniffing and smiling. The road is 1 foot high and the devil is 1 foot high and there are many lives. Just call Naiha. Qin Pingan's eyelids trembled. Xing Juzhong smiled and said, the good words are done, it is gratifying and congratulating. Xianwei complained and said, the life of the sky is like a boat on a dry land. What can I do? Can I be against the sky? Anyway, it's the same purpose. How can words be controlled and how people can come? Xing Juzhong smiled, stood up and left. A small summer money was left on the table as a drink money. Xing Juzhong only said 3 words to Qin Pingan with his own voice. I don't take it seriously. This is probably the way to teach Qin Pingan and Xianwei to get along. Qin Pingan replied with his heartfelt words. Thanks to Mr. Xing for his teaching. After Xing Juzhong walked out of the wine shop, Qin Pingan put the little summer money in his sleeve and shouted to the shopkeeper, let's check out first. Xianwei was confused and asked, Master Chow, who is it? It's not reliable to speak. Fortunately, it's okay to be a man and he knows to leave money for drinks. Qin Pingan was still too lazy to pay attention to this servant, but only gave a snowflake money to the shopkeeper of the wine shop, and drank the so-called Chongchun Palace immortal brew on the table. Qin Pingan asked Xiao Imo to sit and drink, then bowed his head and took a sip of the wine and asked in his heart, Xiao Imo, your 4 flying swords? When I met Xianwei at the inn for the first time, Xiao Imo sacrificed 4 flying swords. Xiao Imo didn't have any hiding things and said straightforwardly, 3 flying swords, the main attack and 1 auxiliary practice, but now they are very tasteless. The 4 flying swords have never had a name and you may still need a son in the future. Do it for you. The first 3, one of them Xiao Imo is most in love because it can drag a star from the sky and fall to the ground. If you ask a sword with someone, you need to really work hard and success or failure depends on this. The other 2 are very mediocre. A magical power that can imitate other people's flying swords, but unfortunately it won't last too long. It will also drop a rank and reduce its killing power. It's better than nothing. There is also a flying sword that can temporarily create a prison and imprison Taoists. The soul still belongs to the slanting edge of the sword, not the right path of swordsmanship. So when I asked people about the sword in the early years, I didn't like to sacrifice these flying swords. They were fancy and impractical. The last flying sword is extremely beneficial to practice in the early stage. It used to make me climb quite quickly. Of course, it is not worth mentioning compared to the power of the sun. This sword can allow me to absorb the world without any refining. His aura within 1,000 miles became what the Qi practitioners call a land of nowhere. and I can take off the sword and transfer to other places to practice. In my early years I waited for me to be among the immortals. Now the immortal realm. After that, this flying sword is meaningless, so I have a taste of it. In the future I will be with the sun. If I meet the sword fairy embryo, Xiaomo will also accept a few direct disciples and teach them swordsmanship carefully until one day I find a suitable person to be my close disciple, as long as the other party Zhou Xian is tough enough. So I stripped out this natal flying sword and gave it to this proud disciple. Qin Pingon smiled. Little Imo, don't just talk, drink more. Xiao Imo had a look of anticipation and asked, "My son in our fallen mountain, is there a suitable candidate now? If there happens to be such a sword fairy embryo on the mountain, I don't have to bother so much, just find a close disciple." It's not a joke. Qin Pingon took a sip of wine, waved his hand and declined and said, "You don't have a joke like you, take your time." Seeing that Xianwei looked in a trance, Qin Pingon asked, "What's wrong?" Xianwei patted his stomach and said aggrieved, "I can't drink enough alcohol, I'm hungry." Where did he think of this wine shop before, which only sells drinks but not food? Moreover, the shopkeeper of the wine shop is only a man, who has a great discrepancy with the book, and the woman who sells the wine is round and jade, ready to come out. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "When you get to the capital, let Xiaomo help you buy an earlier meal." Xianwei frowned when he heard it and said, "There are still more than a dozen miles away. Master Chow, with my feet, walk back slowly not to delay your work." Qin Pingon smiled and turned his head to look outside the wine shop, with people coming and going and passing by. Things that go with wine. Moonlight, beauty, bad words. Hometown misdream. Qin Pingon and other Xianwei drank the wine slowly. The three of them left the wine shop together. Xianwei lingered. When he thought that there was still such a long way to go, he felt stunned and lacking energy. Fortunately, Master Chow was considerate and abducted, leaving the official way, by the shallow water of the reed flower. Let Xiao Imo grab the shoulder of Xianwei, while Qin Pingon used his own water and cloud body and returned to the capital together. The three of them came to a small Taoist temple where the door face did not show the slightest identity. Xianwei nibbled on the sesame seed cakes that Xiao Imo had bought with help. The two rolled together. They were stuffed with dried plums and vegetables. They were delicious and they were full. Qin Pingon stood on the street outside this Jingshi Dao's Xianxia office with arms folded in his hands, as if he was not in a hurry to get started. Seeing that his son did not move, Xiao Imo took a few steps forward, bent down and looked down at the stone monument standing beside the steps. The person who erected the monument is now the Taoist leader of the Chongshu Bureau of the Dai dynasty. According to the inscription, 1A long list of titles, the three-dong disciple led Jingshi Dao Shijing Wu Lingjing, the master of Chongshu Hall. Before passing this place with Ning Yao, Qin Pingon wondered who this Wu Lingjing was and how he was able to hold the title of Tao Jing and manage dozens of Dali court officials, which is equivalent to directly drawing a line with the gods. Later I looked through the files at the Jingqing Qintian supervisor and found out that it was the middle-aged Taoist from the Qingwan Kingdom's Baiyun Temple. According to the current officialdom of Dai, the reason why this person was able to reach the sky in one step is that the abbot of the Chongshu Bureau's affairs is to accompany the capital. The great recommendation of Lu Laoshang from the Ministry of Rights, the friendship of fellow countrymen, the ascension of chickens and dogs to heaven is reasonable. Not only the Chongshu Bureau but in fact together with the white-clothed monk of the Dali Scripture Translation Bureau, the Buddhist dragon elephant who won the title of Master of Sanzang, came from the Qingwan Kingdom and from Baishui Temple. Xianwei said vaguely, "Master Chow, what are you doing here?" Qin Pingon said, "Wandering around." Xianwei asked again, "Then why don't we go in?" Qin Pingon said helplessly, "Don't wait for you to finish eating first?" Xianwei sighed. He didn't even know what the so-called Beijing Master Dao Jingya office was on the plaque. I just felt that such a little dignified Taoist temple and Xiaoman Xiao who couldn't scare myself, a fake Taoist priest. After Xianwei finished eating, he clapped his hands. "Let's go take a look." Xiaoguan's concierge was a little Taoist boy. Qin Pingon claimed to be a friend of Dao Geliang. He came to the Taoist temple for a cup of tea. As soon as he heard that he was a good friend of Gudalu, Xiao Dao Tong let him go. Otherwise his Taoist temple would not accept ordinary outsiders. Jingshi Daojing quickly greeted him personally. He was an old monk in the Golden Core realm. He held the whisk in his hand and hit the inspector with a respectful expression. "I have seen Lord Qin Shan." Qin Pingon made a polite return and said with a smile, "It's disturbing." The old Dao smiled and said, "Where is it? Lord Qin Shanju is the honor of Daelu Academy to come here." Leading the three to sit in a room, the old Taoist asked the Taoist priest to bring tea to the three distinguished guests. Lao Daojing asked softly, "I heard that Qin Shanju has been practicing on the Great Wall of Jianqi for many years. During this period, has he ever discussed the Tao and exchanged knowledge with the sage Baiyujing who sits in the sky?" It means the city lord of Xinshao City in the 12th floor of Baiyujing's 5th floor. Qin Pingon shook his head. "It's just a face-to-face encounter from a distance, and there is no intersection with that old god. In fact, it is a pity. In the future he will definitely visit Xinshao City when he travels to the Qingming world, and of course it is only a visit in the literal sense. As for the Zikalu and his ilk, it is another matter." The old Dao nodded, and when this Qin Jianxian had a cup of tea, he asked if he could walk around in the Taoist temple. The old man smiled and said that there was nothing wrong with it. Qin Shanju left and watched. Qin Pingon took Xiao Emo and Xianwei out of the house. The old Taoist stood at the door for a moment, and then went to busy himself with his affairs. Qin Pingon came under an ancient cypress tree. Xianwei asked curiously, "Xiao Emo, what kind of official is Jing Shideo?" Xiao Emo said, "The Taoist priests in charge of all Taoist priests in Dali capital." "Good official." Xianwei was frightened, his thoughts turned sharply, and he asked tentatively, "Xiao Emo, can you ask Xiao Emo to help me ask for a Taoist priest?" Xiao Emo shook his head and said, "You go and talk to your son about it yourself." Suddenly a few clear chimes. Qin Pingon recovered, put away his thoughts and said, "Let's go." Before leaving the Taoist temple, Qin Pingon found the Jingshi Daojing, and found that apart from Guling, all the Sidaelu, including the Beijing CI litigation, Qing CI and Palm Seal, were all waiting in the office of Master Daojing, as if waiting for Qin Jiangxian's appearance. Qin Pingon just left with a smile as he didn't know these Taoist records to watch the lively thoughts. Later Xiao Emo and Xianwei came to Chongshu Bureau. Because it was the translation office and the newly built government office built by Dali, it seemed more majestic than the old Taoist temple, so Xianwei walked all the way trembling, afraid to breathe. Xiao Emo joked, "Do you need me to help you talk to the sun?" Xianwei heard the implication. He smiled and replied, "Xiao Emo, do you have a bamboo forest in your house?" Xiao Emo was a little at a loss, not knowing how to answer for a while. Qin Pingon finally took off his cloth shoes and sat in a boardwalk outside the Buddhist temple. Xiao Emo took Xianwei and sat on the steps. Qin Pingon put his hands on his abdomen and began to close his eyes and rest his mind. Peace of mind. Tu Tua. Observe the precepts of asceticism. There is an old saying in my hometown, plowing fields on stone cliffs. It is used to describe the poverty and hard work of a poor person, to the point of exaggeration. For some reason it was the first time that Qin Pingon came into contact with the Buddhist case in a book, and when he saw the 4 characters polished into a mirror, he would think of this hometown proverb for no reason. Since a person has their own homes of peace of mind, of course, they also have their own places of worry so that people can't wander around and fight against the wall. Senior brother Tui Yang, probably the attic where the ladder was removed, can only look through the small window. The stars are bright, the wind and rain are shining, the Milky Way is shining, the snow is flying, and the lonely moon is lonely. It may also be that after leaving home, looking at a poor teacher outside the window of a school in a foreign land, his eyebrows were flying when he taught the children the knowledge of sages. Aoyang, it may be a mass grave in the wilderness. Wei Bo may be the woman who went into the water to salvage the fragments of the golden body 1,000 years ago. Married woman ghost may be a courageous scholar who reads aloud the books of sages and sages on that mountain road at night. Has been lingering. The more people want to be black and white and the more they want to distinguish between right and wrong, the more painful they are. Unconsciously, Mu drum sounded. Qin Pingon still closed his eyes and said, "Xiao Emo, you and Xianwei can go back to the house first. Over there." Xiao Emo said softly, "It's okay, we just wait for the sun." As for that Xianwei, he had eaten Jiafan at the interpretation bureau before. The sky was big and the land was big, the food was the best and the face and everything were kept aside. Although sitting here all the time it made Xianwei feel a bit bored, but compared to the distress of the journey northward in those years, it was actually good, and he was thinking about sweetness here. After that, Qin Pingon opened his eyes and looked up. It was already at the heart of the moon to the sky. The bright moon and tall buildings are lonely, and the moonlight is like water and water like the sky. Qin Pingon retracted his gaze and glanced at Xiao Imo and Xian Wei on the other side of the steps. Xiao Imo was still sitting on the other side of the steps. As for Xian Wei, he was quite capable and could fall asleep while sitting. He was snoring like thunder at the moment. Qin Pingon got up and went to the side of the steps, putting on his shoes. Xiao Imo was about to reach out and pat the immortal Wei beside him. Qin Pingon smiled softly. It's okay, let him sleep a little longer. After sitting for half an hour, Qin Pingon patted Xian Wei's head. Said to Xiao Imo, you have to hit someone as soon as possible. Xian Wei rubbed his eyes and asked in a daze, what time is it? The next sentence is whether you want to have a supper. Qin Pingon took them away from the translation bureau, and indeed took Xian Wei to find a supper stall. The old master Yu Hong and his party took the Lichuan ferry of the Changchun Palace and chose to disembark at the Nujiadu, which is about to be renamed the Longzhou area of Chuzhou, and then went to Hongzhou town where the three rivers converge. The Temple of Water God in Yejiang. In the dead of night, Yu Hong visited the water temple. A continent of mountains and rivers, the fourth grade water god. The golden body of this Yuye river god empress is not low. On the water temple, a temple blessing has been changed a few years ago, so he is not a smart person. The good men and believers who come here to burn incense and make wishes are endless. This woman can only say that she treats people decently, but in those on the big pilgrim's side, her ability to manage relationships seems very mediocre. She even made a few mistakes. As a result, several big pilgrims turned to the Xihua River and Chongtan River, but the of water, Li Qingzhu, has never been able to do anything. Moving, it seems that she is the best candidate for her own temple blessing. After Yu Hong reported his identity, he smiled and said that he didn't need to trouble the water empress. They could rush to the water mansion by themselves. But the woman who didn't understand the feelings and sophistication of the temple really did so. Just cast a symbol to open the water and open the way to the water mansion. The secret carriage and horse symbol was ready to enter the water. Yu Hong smiled and didn't care. She took the lead in the carriage. Huang Mei, a direct disciple, looked rather displeased. The Xianxia chariot ran away from the water and soon came to the gate of the water mansion. The temple wished the woman and the guard to report the news. Li Qingzhu soon went out to greet Yu Hong in person, and Dali was the first-class worshipper and he was still a martial artist in the 9 realms. What's more, she had a dewy marriage with a direct disciple of Yu Hong in her early years, and had a lot of trouble in the mountains. Yu Hong keenly noticed that the water empress always seemed to have a little sadness between her eyebrows. In fact, Li Qingzhu's biggest wish in recent years is to seek stability. It is impossible to imagine that a righteous of rivers and rivers has disguised several times and went to the Shanjun Temple and Taifu Jiangshui Temple in Piyun Mountain to burn incense. The Bien's family hosted a wedding banquet in Dali capital. Lin Shui entered Beijing this time specifically to attend the wedding banquet of Shi Jiaqin's eldest son. The last time I met with classmate Shi Jiaqin was many years ago in my hometown Huaihuang town. It is hard to imagine that Shi Jiaqin's son was still a child at that time, and now he is married. Shi Chuanjia just missed her best friend Li Baoping when she was young. This time Lin Shui was the only one who was there. Li Baoping and Li Huai were not there. Dong Xuejing was temporarily in trouble and could not get out of his body and could not rush to the capital, but the trustee gave us staggering money. The key is that the person Dong Xuejing entrusted is even more scary. There is a wine gourd hanging from his waist and he is full of alcohol. He just came here after hanging up. This person does not have a self-registration number at all. He only said that he was helping his friend Dong Xuejing to send red packets up. Fortunately, someone in the Bien's family recognized the identity of the other party. Except for the laziness of the capital's rich family, most of the credit is actually due to that jug. In the officialdom of the capital or even the entire Dali court, this person he is the only one who can take a hip flask to the yamen. But the other party just left the red envelope and left. No one dared to keep this person. Because this person was the drunkard Chao Gingxin, who was transferred from Longzhou supervisor to assistant capital worker Yu assistant, and then to capital assistant, and the eldest grandson of the Chao family of Shangzhou state. Regardless of Chao Jiangxin's reputation in Dallas officialdom, how he is a person and an official, This is the third grade of the real Dali Beijing official. And his second uncle is also the hunter inspector Chao Ping. When the Bian family and the parents got the news, they hurried out to chase the Zhou Xian. I never thought that the man was swaying, but his steps were not slow, and there was no one at the corner of the street. It seemed that during the period she slightly bumped a woman's shoulder and walked back, making an apologize with a bright smile. Seeing that the man looked handsome, the woman probably didn't think she was too disadvantaged, so she just laughed and cursed. In addition to Chao Gung's heart, there is also Zhao Yu, who is serving as the assistant minister of the criminal ministry. Because of his busy work, he also asked someone to send a red envelope, which made the Bian family and the family of the in-laws feel extremely shameful. Shi Jiaqin's husband Bian Wenmao was born in the royal family of the Qing dynasty in Dali capital. His family background is not very prominent. It is just that Bian Wenmao worked in the Hanlin Academy, which was regarded as the place of the prime minister. So although he is not a big official nowadays, but in the end it is the first-class Qing dynasty, so the family worship of the Bian family is an elder of the Zhuxian of the Changchun Palace. Lin Shui is a scholar of De Sui Mountain Cliff Academy, and later became the Dadu Temple Wish at the Dali companion capital. Earlier in the two capitals of Dali and De Sui, Lin Shui was already a great master. The one who talked about it, a typical youthful fame and scholarship, is a young prodigy at Xianxia Academy, but he didn't participate in the imperial examination. He practiced together and made great progress. Lin Shui declined the invitation of Bian's family and did not sit at the main table. He sits at the same table with a group of fairy masters on the mountain. At the main table, the person with the largest official status was a Taoist minister of engineering who was invited by the in-laws of the Bian family. In addition, there is Tanhua Lang Yang Shuang, very young, and Wang Qinrua, one of the 15 second-tier scholars. Both of them are considered back-incomers of the Hanlin Academy of Dai, but Bian Wenmao dares to put on the prestige of the officialdom to these two. Another Fuyu, who had just been transferred back to the capital from the prefect of Baoshi County, took the initiative to chat with Lin Shui. Lin Shui, as the seed of reading in the native place of Dali, is even more of an innocent monk. The old lady enshrined by the Bian family was in the Longmen realm. Although the realm was not high, she was still a member of the Patriarch's Hall in Changchun Palace. Most of the disciples of Changchun Palace went down to the mountain to practice. Except for the Yumi, the old woman still has lingering fears. In addition, the 4 Changchun Palace genealogical monks she brought were all young female monks: Zhongnan, Chumingjiao, Lin Saifu, Hanbia. The highest-ranking person is Zhongnan, and the old women will call her aunt. As for Chu Mingjiao and Han Bia, they are both officials in Dali capital, and their family has no friendship with the Bian family. Zhongnan glanced at that Lin Shui from time to time. Chu Mingjiao kept peeking at the famous Tanhua Lang. Lin Saifu looked at Wang Qinrua, one of the newcomer Maolin Lang, because the talisman he presented was slightly strange, like a fate of marriage. Fengshen Junshuang Yang explores flowers, and Wang Maolin is full of talent. The female monk of the Changchun Palace chooses a beloved man to become a Taoist couple, and then grow old together. This is a practice that cannot be bypassed. Whether the chosen Taoist couple is a mountain person or not is not particular. Only Han Bia just burying her head and eating vegetables, she has to eat the money back. Lin Shou was puzzled, wondering why the young woman from the Changchun Palace looked at herself at different intervals. Understanding? Why is there no impression? He certainly didn't remember that the first time the two met was when Lin Shui went out for a long trip. In the town of Red Candle, one was on the shore and the other on the boat. At that time they were both young girls. At this wedding banquet, Lin Shui stayed until the end, and almost all the guests had dispersed. Shi Jiaqin was still relatively childish, and his son and daughter-in-law didn't care about it. He came to Lin Shui and sat alone, laughing and joking with Lin Shui. Envy or not, my son is married to a wife. You Lin Shou is good, you are still a bachelor. Fortunately you are on the mountain, otherwise you have to add an old word. What? I plan to wait for my grandsons to get married, so you continue to come here for a wedding drink alone? Lin Shou smiled and said nothing. After being slapped on the shoulder, Lin Shou turned his head and looked around. He saw that guy and said in a maddening voice, "Hidden at the wedding wine, right?" The woman looked at the man in the blue shirt and long coat and she blurted out, "Qin Ping'an." In fact, Shi Jiaqin has not seen Qin Pingan for more than 20 years. For some reason I can recognize it at a glance. Qin Pingan smiled and nodded, handed out a red envelope and said with a smile, "Don't be too small, courtesy is light and affectionate." Never thought that Shi Jiachuan opened the red envelope directly. His eyes widened and the young wealthy fan immediately grinned too. Zhou Xian. Shi Jiachuan returned to his hometown last time, but also failed to see Qin Pingan. She vaguely learned some gossip. In addition to taking over the 2 shops in Qilong Alley of the Shi family, Qin Pingan also bought a few hills to the west and became a big landlord. It's just that Qin Pingan seems to be away from home all year round. He likes to be busy outside. He is close to Weibo, the monarch of the Piyun Mountain, and he has climbed a mountain that is unimaginable by ordinary people. It's hard not to make money. Good thing. Good man rewarded. Shi Jiachuan's memory of Qin Pingan is a bit vague. Only one thing is reassuring. However, Shi Jiachuan didn't say a word about these things, even on her husband's side. Qin Pingan sat on the chair next to Lin Shi. Shi Jiachuan laughed, and generously put away the red envelope, went and fetched a jug of wine and 2 wine glasses, and handed them to Qin Pingan. "Sit on the side and give Qin Pingan first. Pour full wine and don't forget to," jokingly said, "I still have a girl waiting to get married. Before the next wedding banquet I will definitely send you an invitation. The money will follow today's specifications. But don't forget it." Just like Lin Shi said, wedding drinks can't be hidden. Qin Pingan smiled and said, "No problem, as long as you don't travel far you will definitely come." Shi Jiachuan smiled and said, "Are there any marriages? It is not much more difficult for the gods on the mountain to find a Taoist couple than to get married under the mountain." Qin Pingan smiled and nodded. "The letter of appointment has been issued and we haven't officially married yet, but it will be soon." Shi Jiachuan squinted at Lin Shi. "Tut, look at Qin Pingan and then look at yourself." Lin Shou drank a sullen wine. Lin Shi suddenly turned his head and looked at the door. He came to congratulate 2 guests who were absolutely unexpected. Emperor Song He of Dai, Queen Yumian. Shi Jiachuan is still whispering, "Who? Such a big air." His husband and the elders of the 2 families are all sweating. "What are you afraid of? Qin Pingan is there anyway." Lin Shi stood up, coughed with Shi Jiachuan and said softly, "It's your Majesty the Emperor and the Empress." Shi Jiachuan rolled his eyes at Lin Shou and he would tell a joke. However, Shi Jiachuan quickly got up. Even if the Bien's family has the surname of the Shangzhou country, if the children get married the Emperor's Majesty can come in person. What do you want, dream? It's just that she looked at her side again. Qin Pingan hadn't got up yet and was busy drinking. Qin Pingan put down the wine glass. Lin Shi had already taken Shi Jiachuan to a wine table elsewhere. Bian Wenmao came to his wife's unsteady steps and grabbed her hand hard. Only at this moment did Shi Jiachuan dare to believe that Lin Shi was really not joking. There was no sound. Emperor Song He walked to the wine table and saluted. "Song He has seen Mr. Qin." Qin Pingan stood up, smiled and asked, "What's the matter?" The emperor said, "I implore Mr. Qin to be the teacher of the Great Li State." Sword of Coming Chapter 887. Emperor Song He said straightforward words, but saw that Qin Pingan didn't seem to have the intention to speak at all. After a while, Song He obviously didn't have the idea of going back home like this. He glanced at the banquet and chopsticks on the table and moved his hand. A chair slightly changed its position, tilted towards Qin Pingan and asked, "Mr. Qin, shall we sit down and talk?" Qin Pingan nodded, moved the chair and pulled his gown again. After sitting down he raised his leg. A pair of white-bottomed and black-faced Melaleuxold cloth shoes are exposed on the feet. Song He said, "Mr. Qin, think about it, I can wait." Qin Pingan asked with a smile, "Does it mean the Queen Mother?" Song He shook his head and said, "It's my own thought." Song He didn't feel that if he asked, the other party would immediately agree to serve as Dali national teacher. 3 groups of people, 3 wedding banquet tables not adjacent. His Majesty the Emperor and Qin Pingan were at a table alone. Naturally they wanted to discuss business matters and both parties were already seated. A king at the foot of the mountain and a suzerain on the mountain are people of the same age. The 2 did not sit opposite each other, nor did they each face the leftovers on the wine table coldly. Queen Yumian stood beside another wine table. During this trip, Emperor Song He naturally went on a tour in microservices. Except for Empress Yumian, he was accompanied by only 3 retinues, an old in the attire of a rich man, and an old who was not very public in the Dali court and the opposition. Enshrined by the Song clan, he is the guardian of the Song clan's imperial tomb. The last retinue stayed on the street outside the gate of Bian's house at this moment, and was responsible for guarding the carriage. Yu Minggui is the queen of Dei, and the Song family of Dei has had the national teacher Cui Yang in the past 100 years. He never worried about the harem, noble relatives and eunuchs in politics. Therefore Yu Mian has also seen many good people on the mountain. Now, as romantic and suave as Weibo, the monarch of Beiyue Mountain, the immortal teacher of Fengxue Temple who looks like a child, and the rich and long beard of the old patriarch of Yunlin Jiang, looks like a god. In addition, there are a handful of exceptions that make Yu Mian even more impressive. For example, Ruan Qiong, the saint of Longquan Jianzong, the chief consecration of the Dei dynasty, can't be said to be raunchy, but dull and reticent, every time he enters the palace. When I saw the emperor, Master Wan didn't have much to say. Almost all the emperors were questioning. Master Wan answered very succinctly and concisely, every time, just like, "Want to go back to the mountain to strike an iron sword." There is also the Xia mountain monarch Tong Wenchang, who is like a villager and veteran, and he likes to be barefoot all year round. Not to mention standing with Weibo, even if standing side by side with Zhongyue Mountain Jinqing, to be honest, she will never judge people by their appearance. I would also sincerely feel that Mr. Tong Shan is indeed a bit shabby. When Tong Shanjun was sitting there, Yu Mian had to worry about when the other party would pick his feet. As for the young sword fairy in the fallen mountain in front of him, of course he will remember Yu Mian vividly. Yu Mian is a very careful woman. She just noticed the pair of finely stitched cloth shoes at a glance. The last table, of course, is the 2 in-laws whose children have just tied the knot. Both of them are officials from Dali capital, and they are not big officials, but they are all clear-cut outflows from the Kejia division. But now there is only one who is eligible to participate in the early dynasty, Bian Wenmao. Everyone held their breath, no one dared to whisper. A pair of newly married couples are flushed with excitement and dreamlike. As the only outsider, Lin Shui sat beside his classmate Shi Jiachuan. Empress Yu Mian turned her head and smiled and looked at them, stretched out her hand and pressed twice to signal everyone to sit down. After everyone sat down, Bian Wenmao found that the empress was still standing there. He wanted to stand up, but just as soon as he lifted his butt, he felt even more wrong, so he had to sit back silently. "Emperor Song," he said, "I have always had a doubt I want to ask Mr. Qin." Qin Pingon said, "Just ask." Song, he asked, "It seems that Mr. Chen's perception of the Dali court is not bad after those encounters back then? For example, according to the espionage report of Dali, Qin Pingon passed the Susui country in the middle of Aquarius Island during the second long journey, and became a friendship with Wufu Song Yushao. The 2 sides faced the pressure of the 10,000 cavalry soldiers. During the formation, the young man holding the Sephora wood sword had his own registration number, and openly put on the sentence, "Dali Qin Pinyin is here." Qin Pingon twisted his wrist and produced an extra red wine gourd. After a sip of the wine, he gently placed the sword gourd on his knees. "The first time I went out, I went to Disway with Lin Shui. The Mountain Cliff Academy in the territory. Exit from Yufuguan and enter Huang Tinghua, which was still a member of the Gao clan of the Disway dynasty. The return route is still from Huang Tinghua. However, they walked a plank road and entered the pass from Naizulan. At that time the wind and snow were extreme. During the period I ran into a team of frontier scouts. One of them stood out. He was a young pawn. He was probably in his early 20s at the time. I didn't quite understand why that rode his horse. It would be a resolute look. I only wanted to understand later. This team mistook me for an enemy spy at first, and it might be a trainer, so the most correct way at the time was to notify the neighborhood immediately. Those monks who accompanied the army of the Dali Iron Cavalry, and the narrow road meeting in the wind and snow, the 2 sides are very likely to be born and die instantly. When I declare my identity, I will pass the customs clearance certificate issued by the Longquan County government to check my identity. After being correct, the rider sitting on horseback did not throw the pass to me but got off the horse. After handing it back, he smiled and said something to me, roughly meaning the weather is terrible and the road is blocked by wind and snow. If you are worried about getting into trouble, you can go to their feng shui to take a rest, prepare food and wait for the wind and snow to lighten up. A long-distance tourist who has walked through thousands of mountains and rivers tells me about this past that happened more than 20 years ago. Emperor Song. He was very patient, not missing a word, but after listening, it was inevitable that he was a little bit suspicious. It's just such a small matter? Qin Pingon asked. Does your majesty feel that things are too small and I can't believe it? Song He nodded and said, it's true, I would not believe it. Qin Pingon smiled and said, is it really a trivial matter? Shaking his head, Qin Pingon asked and answered, I don't think it is necessarily. As a Dali cavalry facing the gods on the mountain, he is not afraid of death. As a frontier scout, he is very concerned about the people of Dali. This made the teenager of Huaihuang County, Longquan County, who had just started practicing boxing and martial arts, a kiln worker apprentice in Muping Lane, who had to worry about stepping on dirty bluestone slabs in Fulu Street, Taoya Lane, got the first relatively clear impression. Qin Pingon carried the sword gourd and knocked on his knees. In my opinion, there are 3 people who can turn the sky into the sky for Howren. This kind of statement, even if it is a fact, would still seem out of place and suspicion of being outspoken to any outsider. But speaking from Qin Pingan's mouth, it seemed extremely weighty and it couldn't be more appropriate. In the past, everyone might think that Qi Jingchun's selection of an inconspicuous young man in Mud Bottle Alley and accepting apprentices on his behalf would be too childish. It is inevitable to ask why. But now everyone would think that Qi Jingchun had a very good vision for the close disciple who received such a sustainable incense for Wenxing's line in the Lizhu cave, which was close at hand. Empress Yu Mian was considerate, personally brought a jug of wine and a wine glass to Emperor Song He. Qin Pingon smiled and nodded to her. The Empress leaned sideways and gave a blessing. The woman in front of him, Siru Jiai, a Song daughter-in-law who is not liked by the Queen Mother Nanzhan, is definitely a good Empress Dali. When Yu Mian walked back to the previous wine table, Song He smiled and said, Yu Mian always feels that Mr. Qin is a gentleman who cultivates both internally and externally. Qin Pingan almost mistakenly thought that Xiaomo was possessed by the emperor in front of him and asked, why do you see it? Song He said, there is a table at the gate of Luopa Mountain which will provide tea for passers-by. Qin Pingan laughed off. I just said a little thing, Your Majesty, how can you learn? If this is the case, it would be no better than Xianwei's trick of cheating money. Furthermore, the local woodcutter in Huaihuang County and the master potter who went into the mountains to find soil dare to sit down and drink tea. Song He continued, in Yu Mian's words, you can see from small to big. You can see Mr. Chen's family style and the family style of Luopashan from the details. Wealthy people often have poor relatives and never return empty-handed. The home of loyalty. Passing by the high gate, the people will not like to avoid disasters and deliberately walk through quickly. It is the gate of goodness. Qin Pingon was taken aback for a moment and nodded, Your Majesty has a good helper. Shijiachuan craned her neck and quietly glanced at Qin Pingan. Just one got up and then took a seat as if Qin Pingon had completely changed himself. Don't wear a white hosta, a long green shirt and a pair of cloth shoes. The smile on his face is calm and his aura is dusty. Probably that is the immortal Dao Qi that has been living in the mountains for a long time. In short, it wasn't the dark-skinned, bright-eyed straw-shoe boy back then. Shijiachuan withdrew his gaze, glanced at his husband and then at Lin Shui. Husband Bian Wenmao is already a man with slightly creamy temples. However, Lin Shui, who was about the same age, still had the appearance of a weak crown. Bian Wenmao's understanding of Lin Shui's wife only said that Lin Mumutu was a zealous person with facial paralysis. His father used to be a small official in the yamen of his hometown's Kiln Affairs Supervision and Construction Bureau. A small official, put it in the place, maybe even the lintel is glorious, but in the Nangsanfang where it is said that the official Lang official walks everywhere, it is not enough to see. Lin Shui joked softly, remember to look for the chair that Your Majesty is sitting on, and put it back and put it away so it can be used as a family heirloom. Shijiachuan glared and wanted to say something, but Bian Wenmao stretched out her hand in a panic and pressed her arm hard. Shijiachuan stretched out a finger against her lips to remind Lin Shui not to say anything. Lin Shou smiled and nodded and looked at the apologetic Bian Wenmao with sweat on his forehead. Bian Wenmao smiled bitterly. He was too nervous. Yu Mian looked at Lin Shui, a 40-year-old monk in the Yuanying realm who had served as a gift for the Chidu temple. You must know that the supreme elder of Changchun Palace is the nascent soul realm. Wan Qiong, the chief worshipper of the Dai dynasty, was also the Yupu realm. There are many small vassal states in the south, and a golden celestial earth immortal can serve as the chief worshipper or even the national teacher. His Majesty the Emperor actually liked this person very much, and even deliberately let Lin Shi take charge of the ceremonial shrine to sacrifice to the Qing clerk. After 7 or 8 years of qualifications in the officialdom of the capital, he could once again be promoted as a minister of ceremonies. It may be because the younger generation of the old Liju Dongtian is too dazzling and shining. That makes Lin Shi not so conspicuous. Because there is Qin Pingan in the Luopa mountain Lu Xianying, the sword fairy who used to study in the Qin family in Nanpasuazhou for 10 years, Ma Kushuan who is a blockbuster in Zhenwu mountain, and Zhao Yu who has been to the Wuxia world of Xing department and even more. There is Gu Ken the mad disciple, who became the direct disciple of Xing Juzhong in Beidasheng. It seems to have overlooked this Lin Shi who has always been going around in Aquarius Island. There is no unattainable mountain pedigree, no horrifying mountain fighting method, only year after year of concentrated study and silent cultivating, so Lin Shi's so-called famous moves in 2 capitals is actually far underestimated, because nowadays, Lin Shi is only regarded as the golden core immortal on the mountain. The aphorism of Yuan Ying is misleading. Shi Jiaqun was really curious. She leaned over, put a hand to cover her mouth, lowered her voice and asked Lin Shou in a low voice, "What is your Majesty talking to Qin Pingan?" Lin Shi said, "I can't hear you either." The mausoleum guard who cultivated in the mausoleum of Dai Emperor set a ban on mountains and rivers that cut off the heavens and the earth. Shi Jiaqun said in a daze, "Qin Pingan is so courageous and chatting with your Majesty is so casual. Is this considered a chattering?" Lin Shou smiled and nodded. Not brave enough to be the last hermit of the Great Wall of Jianqi. Besides, if Qin Pingan was timid he would like Ning Yao? Shi Jiaqun hesitated. Lin Shi said in his heart, "Don't worry, no matter whether the talk is over there or not, it's a good thing for you anyway. Qin Pingan has always done things safely." With Qin Pingan's temper, if Emperor Song he dared to anger his family, the consequences would only be more serious than turning his face on the spot with Qin Pingan. It would be possible to go back to the palace and lift the table directly. But I believe that with today's mind and energy, it will not be so small. Lin Shi still doesn't know, but Qin Pingan has already turned the table with Queen Mother Nanzhan. Shi Jiaqun nodded. Whether it was Lin Shi who had been studying for many years at the school in her hometown school, or Qin Pingan who later became Li Baoping's little uncle, she felt that they were trustworthy. This is a female instinct. Xiao Mo and Xian Wei did not go to the side's house to attend the wedding banquet, but looked for a nearby alley. Xiao Mo stood against the wall. Xian Wei squatted aside and took a pot of wine. He bought it at his own expense. There was no way. He couldn't afford to pay for the money and could not drink the wedding wine, so he could only do it on his own. It doesn't matter, anyway, in the future I will be a cultivator of immortality, and my pockets are filled with immortal money. What are the yellow and white things under the mountain such as gold and silver? It is too tacky and detrimental to immortality. Xian Wei looked at the busy traffic outside Bian's house and said, "Guanglu Temple Qing, the official is not small, not to mention the Beijing official of your Dali dynasty. According to the rules of Aquarius Island today, the local officials of Dali are better than the civil servants of the vassals. For the first grade, the Jingguan must be the next higher grade. If this is the small country of the vassal in the south, it must not be the leader of the great 9 Qingyamen, or at least a master of the 6 ministers. Master Chao is indeed on the mountain, and the friends you know are either rich or noble. There is no such thing as a friend." Xiaomo looked at the immortal Wei, who looked up and drank like a cow and couldn't help asking, "Do you like drinking so much?" Xian Wei put down the hip flask, hiccuped, patted his stomach and wiped his mouth. "I don't like it much." Then Xian Wei raised the jug in his hand and grinned. "Am I drinking? I drink money. These years of displacement, desolation and desperate hunger and coldness. The key to a full meal and 3 meals is to rely on scams and abductions to make money, otherwise you really want to be a beggar. Every time you make a move you have to be frightened. After all, prison food is not delicious. Now following Master Chow, I can't sleep if I have a place to eat bread when I am hungry and drink when I am thirsty." This has already made Xian Wei cry for happiness. Xian Wei remembered something. "Xiaomo, tell me the truth, Why does the old real person from the Jingqing Road Jingya office call Master Chao, Qin Shanju? Xiao Mo said, Chao Mo is a pseudonym for the sun who walks in the rivers and lakes. Little Mo, Xianwei took a sip of his wine and said in the same tone as Chao Mo, I want to ask you what the mountain said? Is there a Xianxia mountain, a fairy cave, a dragon entrenched and a bird screaming forever? Exotic flowers and weeds all over the mountains and plains, treasures of nature and land that can be seen everywhere. Since Chao Mo is a cultivator who knows the skills of the immortal family, he can enter and leave at will at the Taoist office and the translation bureau of the Beijing Normal School. He is also a mountain lord, and he must be no different. Don't weigh how thick is this thigh that I am holding. How high is the backer that I found by my ability? Xiao Mo lowered his head and glanced at Xianwei. Because he can keenly perceive the other's heartstrings, this guy always has such a whimsical mind. Xiao Mo explained, the sun bought a few hills in his hometown. Xianwei asked, the top of the mountain? How big? Xiao Mo said, I've never been to the sun's hometown. Leaving the capital this time, you will soon be able to see the mountain with your own eyes. Xianwei said. Xiao Mo asked, I will follow my son to go up the mountain and cultivate the Tao. What do you want to do? It must be, how could it not be? Xianwei stubbornly cut the railroad. We must capture the fox, the charm and the ghosts. The goddess will dream and we will swim in the fairyland. Xiao Mo regretted asking this question. Listening to Xianwei's rants, he was summed up by this guy as 30 things that must be done after cultivating to become an immortal. Xiao Mo couldn't listen anymore and couldn't help reminding him. Said, Xianwei, have you ever heard of a nobleman's speech late? Flower seems to be the most troublesome but sure can't be the most pleasant. Xianwei stopped talking angrily. Suddenly his expression changed slightly and said anxiously, Master Chao's hilltop is fine. It's better not to be near Piyun Mountain. Xiao Mo asked, why is this? Gao Fengliang pierced Yunshan Mountain, two-sleeved breeze Wei Shanjun. Xianwei slapped his hands with his hip flask and said with emotion, Xiaoma, you haven't heard of this? Even I have heard of the great name of Wei Shanjun at Piyun Mountain. It is said that there will be several night banquets a year. The fairy masters on the mountains, the city gods and the gods of the mountains and the gods of the water in the entire Beiwei boundary, all of them smashed the pots and sold iron, fastened their belts and lived their lives. They were miserable and they were just a big rooster passing by Piyun Mountain. Only the next 2 eggs can go. Xianwei has been traveling north through hardships over the years, and has nothing to do with the mountain, nor has he ever been to a Xianxia ferry. As for those fairy houses on the mountains with clouds and mists, don't even think about it. Xianwei only deals with poor mountains and bad waters all the way. It means that his general rhetoric can only be heard from the rivers and lakes under the mountain, so you can imagine the famous and good reputation of Weibo and Pianshan. Xiao Mo was quite surprised when he heard that even if the hearsay of Xianweido is a bit exaggerated and moist, even if you make a half-fold. So Xiao Mo thought about it. To be on the safe side, it seems that he had to prepare it early. It's a gift so as not to make a stingy evaluation on Wei Shanjun's side. It is really embarrassing for his son to stand with such a neighbor who is not an easy generation. Xianwei looked at a place on the street and said, Xiao Mo, look at that coachman. He looks like an old and strong trainer. Look at the bulging muscles of the 2 arms. I guess I can punch down. The table pierces, hits people and you can't spit out a bottle of blood? Xiao Mo, although you are a halfway immortal master after all, you are not as accustomed to the world as I am. When you encounter this kind of person in the future, you must be careful. Be careful, detour and behave well. An old coachman stood next to a carriage, dozing with his arms around his chest. He noticed the sight from the other side of the alley, and the old coachman opened his eyes. The guy squatting and drinking is a Lujin realm trainer. But the monk in the yellow hat and blue shoes seems to be the worship of Luopashan. He just recorded the file at the Ministry of Justice and became the 3rd-class worship of Dali. The name is Shizhu and the name is strange? Anyway, it was Zhang Xinface who had accompanied some guy to the palace before and made a lot of noise over there, and his realm should not be too low. The old coachman intends to look at his supernatural powers to find out to see if he can identify the general roots and depths of his actions. I just took a look. What's wrong? If you don't want to be seen, don't go out. Xiao Mo smiled in his heart. Senior spied on his popular machine without authorization. This is not in compliance with the rules, right? The divisions of the ancient lay department in the old heavenly court were quite powerful. They were responsible for driving the sea and moving the mountains, moving the four seasons, raising and lowering the yin and yang, holding the balance of things and the division of health and death. In particular, the lay department's division of investigation, who is responsible for the implementation of penalties, whether the victim is a dereliction of duty, an illegal land immortal, or a genus of a chaotic dragon spirit, shall first cut off his god, then examine his shape and let his shape disappear. As a result, the corpse was shattered and the primordial spirit was broken. The old coachman was slightly surprised. It was not a fuel-efficient lamp. Now that the other party was wary, the old coachman did not continue to use his natal supernatural powers, but casually asked, "Sword repair? Where did it come from? The Central Earth Confucian Temple rationed Qin Pingan's guardian? Or did it come from the Sword Qi Great Wall whose reputation is not obvious? The criminal officer's line? I am indeed a sword repairman. As for where I come from, since I am not familiar with the predecessors at the moment, let alone friends, I won't let my heart go, so I won't talk more." Xiaomo still smiled. "It's just that the troubled seniors respect my son. It's best not to call him by his first name, such as Mr. Qin or Mr. Qin Shanju. It will be fine." The old coachman was amused. He was so agitated and he was stinking to learn from whom. Even the little baby with the surname Qin seemed to be chatting with himself. He wouldn't be so silly. Besides, when did an upper 5-realm sword repairer lose so much? What can't you do? Go to be a doggy follower for a young man in his 40s. However, the old coachman is now much more cautious in his words and actions, and he tentatively asked, "The fortune teller of Luz was cut by you?" Xiaomo asked, "Listening to what seniors mean, do you want to be familiar with me? If you want to get acquainted with Xianxia, of course you can only ask the sword and lead the sword." The old coachman almost ignored his temper. The guy in the yellow hat and blue shoes. Look at that warm-hearted, speaks in no rush, for some reason always feels that this person is more owed than Qin Pingan. Just thinking that he had just cleaned up the old Xiao at the flower shed of the Wuxian temple earlier, the old coachman took a deep breath, stopped speaking and closed his eyes again. Xiaomo asked with a smile, "When did the senior's temper become so good?" The old coachman turned a deaf ear. Xiaomo stretched out his hand to support the yellow hat on his head and smiled. "In the early years, the Jade Hub Zhongguan division, thunder and lightning, so magnificent, deafening, and the heart trembling when you see." The old coachman suddenly opened his eyes, staring at the young monk who opened the old calendar, and asked each other in his heart like thunder, "Say, where are you sacred?" Xiaomo smiled. He's just an unknown little person. It was just that he had asked about the sword with the chief officials of Leibu, 1 mansion and 2 houses. Xianwei got up and ran into the alley quickly, but he didn't forget to turn his head and reminded, Xiaomo, that old coachman seems to be staring at you. Don't fight, go out and make money." The old coachman sighed and closed his eyes again. "I can't move the old yellow." At the Bien's wedding banquet lobby, Qin Pingan was a little helpless. Today he seemed to be forced to become the host here, sending out the most distinguished couple of the Dali dynasty outside the lobby. It's just that Qin Pingan stopped after crossing the threshold, and there was no need to send it to the street beyond the mansion gate. Yu Mian smiled and asked, "Dare to ask Mr. Qin, these cloth shoes are sewn by Ning Jianxian?" Qin Pingan smiled kindly, shook his head and said, "It was given to me by an old mother. Although there are more than 20 pairs of cloth shoes, I still need to save some wear. The only flaw is that I can't bear to wear them on rainy days." After that, Bian Wenmao, men, women and children of the 2 families of course had to follow along. The emperor song. He chatted with the border temple Qing of Guanglu Temple all the way. The Empress Yu Mian had a gentle expression, and she was congratulating the newlywed couple. Lin Shuyi stood at the door accompanying Qin Pingan. Qin Pingan asked with a smile, "Still the same way? I have nothing to say after seeing your father?" Lin Shou nodded. "It's good to get used to it. Every family has its cupboard. Each time the father and son meet, it usually does not exceed 3 sentences. There was only one exception. When Lin Shuyi was about to take up the post of Dadu Temple Zhu, the father who had been practicing for most of his life at the public school, only said a few more words. Qin Pingan has always admired Lin Shuyi. Even if I have seen many well-deserved Taoist geniuses, I still feel that Lin Shuyi's Taoism is clear and does not lose anyone. When the group traveled far to study, Qin Pingan wore straw sandals and a hatchet at his waist, and was responsible for clearing the way in vigil. Little treasure bottle is innocent and innocent, whimsical. At that time Cui Dongshan was weird and absurd. Lin Shuyi is serious, Yu Lu is indifferent, thank you for your perseverance. As for Li Huai, just do it at will. Anyway, he's good at nesting. Zhu He has a stable temperament and Zhu Lu is arrogant and willful. Of course, there is also the alien who Qin Pingan was curious about, whether he could beat Zhu He or not. This is Qin Pingan's first long trip. When returning home there were more girls in pink skirts and children in Tsing-yi, and on the snowy plank road, they also met Bai Zai and Hu Mei Qingying. Shi Jiaqun was the first to come back here. She carried her skirt, rushed back all the way, stood on tiptoe and slapped Qin Pingan's shoulder vigorously. Although I don't know what the Emperor's Majesty came to talk with Qin Pingan specifically, but Shi Jiaqun was smart when he was a child. Before he went to the school he would plan to help settle the accounts in his own shop. A monk on the mountain who can make His Majesty the Emperor's main action salute. A guy sitting next to Emperor Dali who dared to cross his legs. This is unimaginable. Among the people of the same age in the town, Lin Shui as on the mountain and Ma Kushuan in Xinghua Lane are very good. The most promising officer is of course Zhao Yu, who is the chief minister of the criminal ministry. To do business it must be Dong Shuijing. Otherwise he can do business with the children of Shangzhou Kingdom like Chao Gingxin and Yuan Jingding and be friends? Before that, Shi Jiaqun only regarded Qin Pingan as the rich man on the mountain, and at best he was similar to Dong Shuijing. But since they are friends, of course the better they are. Bian Wenmao was frightened by his wife's disrespectful actions and his face paled. Qin Pingan smiled and said, "It's okay." Lin Shui dismantled the platform and said, "It's okay. How can Lord Qin let me deal with it?" Shi Jiaqun grinned and said, "I knew this. The price of the 2 shops in Qilong Alley in my house had to be at least doubled back then. It's really a bargain." Bian Wenmao pulled his wife's sleeve. On Mr. Chen's side, don't be so rude. Qin Pingan looked at Bian Wenmao and explained with a smile. Bian Siqing, the last time Shi Jiaqun returned home, I happened to be traveling abroad. If I was not in my hometown I missed it with you. This is the first time I have traveled in so many years. Beijing, so I didn't meet until today. Don't be surprised. I bought the New Year's Eve shop and Chaotu shop in Qilong Alley at a low price from the Shi family. This favor is great. Today Qin Pingan's elementary money is 2 small summer coins, which are calculated according to the market price on the mountain, which is 200,000 taels of silver. There may be an extra 1 to 20,000 taels of silver. Price. Of course it is not that Qin Pingan can't come up with 2 guyu money, but it is not appropriate. Bian Wenmao hurriedly laughed and said, I have often heard Jiaqun talk about Mr. Qin these years. I saw him today and he was well deserved. Now Bian Wenmao works at the Guanglu Temple in Zaijiaqing, serving as the senior of Guanglu Temple. The official is not big but he is in charge of affairs and holds real power. In his early years, Bian Wenmao was born in the 2nd grade Jinshi. After he left the Imperial Academy he had a lot of toss and turns inside the Beijing Yamen. First he went to the Imperial College and served as an assistant in law. Before the temple he had been a Fengli Lang of Taichung Temple. Bian Wenmao's promotion in the officialdom was unhappy, but it was fairly stable. The only problem is that he didn't serve in the 6 government offices. In this life he was a Shaoqing of Guanglu Temple. Bian Wenmao was certain of it. But if he would one day be in charge of Guanglu Temple, he did not dare to have any extravagant expectations. Li Huai told Qin Pingan about this Bian Wenmao, a capital official with eyes on his forehead. He didn't look down on the local buns in these small towns. Everyone liked to answer the question but he still treated Shi Jiaqun. Not bad. Shi Jiaqun smiled brightly, secretly stretched out a hand, shook it gently and signaled to Qin Pingan that there was no such thing at all. Just listen to the kind words of her husband. As soon as Qin Pingan and Lin Shou left the Bian's house, Lin Shi asked, Would you like to sit in my house? My father was born in a kiln and your elders are well connected so I guess I have some chat with you. Qin Pingan shook his head and said earnestly, Shi, the old man is no longer young. Don't look at your father without a smiling face on your side. As long as you become a relative, then you will not be concerned about sons and daughters and other generations of kissing. It doesn't make sense to say that your father's smiling face in one day has been kept for more than a year on your side. If you don't believe it, we can make a small bet on eaching just 2 small summer money. Lin Shou smiled and his lips moved slightly. At this moment the silence was better than the sound and he gave Qin Ping a roll. Qin Pingon took out a booklet from his sleeve and said with heart, Mr. Qi promoted the Lei Ju and there are still some discrepancies with the Long Hushan Tian Shifu. By chance I learned a little bit of Fur and compiled it. This booklet, your qualifications are good. After reading through it, see if you can make progress in every possible way. Lin Shui slipped into his sleeve and laughed angrily. If you give a gift, just give it, don't say it's like receiving a gift. Qin Pingon tut and said, you have a face to say about me? You the gift recipient are like a gift. Lin Shui asked, is this back? Qin Pingon nodded and said, I will leave the capital soon, either today or tomorrow, and then I need to rush to Tongyi's Hao immediately to establish the next festival. The specific time has not yet been determined, roughly at the end of this winter or the beginning of spring next year. Anyway, go if you have time and forget it if you don't have time. Lin Shui said, if I can't get to Tongyi's Hao, you can ask Dong Shuijing to count my good money together. Anyway, he has a lot of money in his pocket. In Qian's eyes, he likes to be a rich man. Apart from having no ability to make money, he deserves to be a bachelor. Qin Pingon held back a laugh. Lin Shui is generally not like this. The exception is Dong Shuijing's side. The reason is very simple. The 2 former classmates both missed Li Lu when they were young, and became rivals for each other. In the end, neither of them turned out to be the end of the game. Li Lu did not marry. When Li Lu married a foreigner, Lin Shui and Dong Shuijing now meet each other again. It's a different kind of dislike to see each other. Probably both of them have both on their foreheads. I was put on a label by the other party written in 2 big characters, waste. Lin Shui was about to leave and looked at each other with Qin Ping and Qin Pingon, and Xiao Mo said in their hearts. They told him to take Xianwei to follow them and walk to Chunshan Academy together. On the carriage, Yu Mian asked, what did Mr. Qin say? Emperor Song, he rubbed his eyebrows. He said that next time he passes by the capital, he will give an exact explanation. Yu Mian stretched out his fingers, gently twisted the emperor's sleeves, squinted and smiled and said charmingly, don't get sulking. Song, he laughed blithely, holding her hand backhand. Envy Mandarin ducks but not immortals. Yu Mian smiled as usual, lowered his body and pressed his cheek to the back of the emperor's hand. She just didn't know the emperor's palms were sweaty. Obviously, after she sent her hip flask and wine glasses, the 2 parties did not talk easily. Chunshan Academy. The old scholar waited for his disciple Qin Pingon, before passing on his disciple Lin Shui. Lin Shui is very good, but he is still not good at bachelor. The old scholar had a very good impression of this college. This was not here last time, and he recognized a distant nephew named Zhou Jiegu at no cost. The old scholar was waiting at the gate of Chunshan Academy. He will soon return to the Qinta Confucian Temple. The old man held his hands and looked up at the plaque in the college. Spring Mountain. The words are well written and the names are also well obtained. The spring of Qi Jingchun, the mountain of Cui Dongshan. Qin Pingon and Lin Shui fell into shape and saluted each other. The old scholar turned around and asked with a smile, Pingon, Shuchi, tell me which one of my studies do you like the most? Qin Pingan's answer is to encourage learning. Lin Shui's reply is on Tianlun. The old scholar stroked his beard and smiled, they are all excellent. The 3 of them walked into the academy together and the old scholar slowly said, the gentleman said learning is impossible. Knowing the difference between heaven and man, it can be said to be very human. The stars follow the rotation, the sun and the moon pass the bamboo. The 4 eras are imperial, the yin and yang are greatly transformed and the wind and rain are beneficial. The sky sees its bright, the earth sees its light, and the gentleman cherishes its pure and complete. The change of heaven and earth, the transformation of yin and yang and the rarer things. The strangeness is also possible but the fear is also not. Therefore a gentleman must choose his hometown when he travels. Shi, are there any doubts about Tianluan? There are several places. Okay, there is no doubt about reading, it is equal to the intestines, we just walk and talk, you ask and I answer. By the way, Shi, if you encounter similar academic problems in the future, you can send a letter to the Gongda Lin. As for the practice, if you encounter the problem, you can directly ask Jingsheng Shiping. Taoism is one way. I can help you transfer it to Fu Lu Yushuan or Zhao Tianshi. But these two are not too busy now and may have to reply to you later. But if you encounter a bigger problem. Qin Pingon smiled and said, as long as I am short of money, I will definitely not charge interest. When I have money and when I will pay back, I will definitely not call for debts. The old show will smile heartily. Listen. What is a proud disciple? Lin Shi stretched out his hand. Bring it. Qin Pingon was stunned. What? Lin Shi said, to break the bottleneck of yuanying, I need a few foreign treasures. I estimated that I would need 100 grains of rain money. I'm really worried. I came to Beijing this time to raise money. Qin Pingan leaned forward and looked at his husband. The old scholar coughed and looked ahead. The scenery of Chunshan Academy was extremely beautiful. Qin Pingon slapped Lin Shi's hand. Wait a few days before I return to Luopa Mountain and ask the accountant Wei Wenlong for money. It will definitely not delay your business. Lin Shi put his hand away and asked with a smile. Dang Shan, don't you have any private money? Qin Pingon said awe-inspiringly. What kind of private money does a man want? The old scholar immediately understood why he was in the line of Wenxing, and the close disciple alone was able to find a daughter-in-law. This comprehension is hard to get. Lin Shi asked a few questions about scholarship. Although there were not many problems, he was an old scholar who was regarded as the ancestor by seniority. He spoke very carefully and took half an hour. After that, Lin Shi left the academy and said that he was going home. One trip. Qin Pingon said in his heart. Shi, if you need someone else to protect the road before the retreat breaks the border in the future, you must remember to say hello to me. As long as I am not in another continent at the time, I will protect you. How about? Lin Shi made a rare joke. I am so polite with the little uncle, that's all. Qin Pingon reminded. 1 yard goes to 1 yard. When you enter the upper 5 realms, you have to return the cost of 100 grain rain coins. I make an exception and give you a 20% discount. Lin Shou smiled and said nothing. Qin Pingon felt that the matter was suspended. Returning to the mountain gate the same way Lin Shi Yufeng returned to the capital. During the period, I met a young man with a yellow hat and blue shoes, and a young Taoist priest who looked around and curious. The old scholar took out a kit from his sleeve and handed it to Qin Ping, and Qin Pingon received the kit in a bewildered manner, and opened it to see that he was surprised that there was the colorful knot of ant fongs inside. It is refined from the lifeblood of the gods of flowers of Baiwafuti. The old Xiucai smiled and said, why don't you get married? Senior Ant Feng asked you to hand it over to the flower master of Baiwafuti. The only requirement is to let the December flower of Futi come here with her sincerely. Apologize. Ant Feng means that this thing is rare. You can't run errands in vain at that time. You have to ask Futi for the title of Taishang Kiching. If you don't give it, you don't give it away. There are many flower gods in the 100 flowers, and the December flower is the highest. Among them, the blessed land flower owner is the head. After that, the 4 life masters who are responsible for the 4 seasons of flowers bloom, and then the 7 flower gods who hold the moon. Empress. In December, the goddess of flowers each has his own natal guest. This position will certainly not be left empty. In addition to that, there will be more senior guests, but most of them are wishful thinking of the goddess of flowers. For example, Bai is the grandest guest of Peony, but Bai will not travel to Baihuafu as a guest. As for the grand guest of the entire 100 flowers fortune land, after the catastrophe of the blessed land of violent winds, anger and withering flowers, it has been hanging in the air for thousands of years. What is waiting is who can retrieve this colorful knot from the Feng Jiamazi. Qin Pingon said, Sir, I know how Senior Ant Feng's speaking style is. I can help deliver things and talk, but the grand guest of this whole blessed land, even if 100 flowers and fortune take the initiative to give it to me, I won't want it. The old scholar smiled and did not persuade him for the time being. If the negotiation is not made, the god of fortune flower is unwilling to come here to admit mistakes. You have to promise Aunt Feng to protect the flower pickers on the mountain from being killed. When I turn around, I will send a letter to the flower master empress, personally teach the tips and tricks. For example, let them accept the colored knots first and then suddenly change their words. If you, Mr. Chen, don't agree to the guest, you won't go to Ao Pingzhou to ask Aunt Feng to apologize. Qin Pingon hesitated to speak but stopped. The old Xiucai whispered, Don't worry too much about Aliang and Zwa idiot. Because the kid Li Huai said something unintentional when he was hanging around with Taoist Nin, saying my brother Aliang is not a bachelor. As for the invincible swordsman Zhou, he still has to teach him. I have a few swordsmanship skills. Qin Pingan's face was embarrassed and said, Sir, this is also true? The old scholar smiled and said, Just wait and see. Qin Pingan breathed a sigh of relief. The old scholar turned his head and waved vigorously and shouted, Xiaoma Xiaoma this way. After hearing this, Xiaomo asked Xian Wei to stroll around by himself first, and came to Mr. Wenxing alone. For some reason, seeing this young Wenxing, Xiaomo always felt like he was getting along with an elder. Probably because Wenxing is highly knowledgeable and shows old age? The old scholar said, Brother Xiaomo, I am going to return to the Confucian temple soon, so this closed disciple will be taken care of by you. Xiaomo nodded and said, Mr. Wenxing, I can't guarantee that there will be no accidents, but I can guarantee that if there is any accident, Xiaomo will definitely stand next to the sun, and the sword will not be slow. Good. This is absolutely domineering. The old scholar smiled at hearing and gave a thumbs up. It's worthy of the little Imo brother whom I met and hit it off. Later I will introduce you to Bai Yi Daochongsun and Tianshi Zhao. They are all my best friends. No way me. There are not many friends and there are only so few people with good swordsmanship. Xiaomo Zui thanks. The old scholar hurriedly held Xiaomo's arm. I will return to Central Earth Shenzhou this time, and I will talk to the old-fashioned Confucian temple gang in advance. In the future, Brother Xiaomo will travel across the continent in Howren, so I don't need to report to the Confucian temple. Xiaomo thought for a while but declined the matter. Mr. Wenxing's kindness accepted it, but I think this matter is still going according to the rules. Xiaomo shouldn't make Mr. Wenxing and the son embarrassed about this kind of thing. The old scholar gently patted Xiaomo on the shoulder, and then helped tidy up his clothes, just like an old man sees a young junior who is about to leave his hometown. The old man smiled and murmured, Acceptable, understanding. Xiaomo is very kind. Xiaomo smiled shyly, a little overwhelmed. Qin Pingan smiled and said, When the saints and heroes meet, when it comes to human sentiment, the sword will sing. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.